It's possible that this thing was hanging out there, maybe a technology, and then it turned on and started zooming through. If it was antimatter, what would a antimatter collision to Mars look like? Not recognizing that here you have this massive plasma engine flying through the inner solar system. How may that affect the solar wind or solar activity? There seems to be a connection between Earth's magnetic field, the sun, and the interstellar environment. Sometimes it nearly is a reversal, sometimes it is a reversal, sometimes it's just kind of like a weak one. It's not like you look at the record, it's like, whoa, there's like every something, it's kind of sporadic. If the poles are flipping, let's say this century, the radiation problem is going to be a big concern. There's probably some things that exist on this planet that we're just simply not aware of yet. Maybe some of them are smaller population numbers, but more technologically advanced. That seems to influence earthquake activity due to how energy is being loaded into the planet. There's certain features on the sun called coronal holes that seem to influence earthquake activity. Guys, we just saw a really weird energy burst in the Schumann resonances. We may have a big earthquake coming up, and then 2 days later we do. Perfect alignment between all the planets going out to 5.2 astronomical units this January. So don't be surprised if we see structures dissolve at the societal scale. We see strong, powerful Earth events and tremendous transformations internally.
Good to have you back here today, brother. I'm excited to chat with you. It's not often that I get a return guest so quickly. So, you're, I think that we had a great time last time. And why don't we jump into 3i Atlas and kind of talk to us about that a little bit, maybe to kick off the show. So what is this object and what is happening with it right now?
Yeah. Well, we don't know what it is. It seems to be probably some chunk of rock, and if we go by some of the best ideas of like solar system formation, which is n=1, and there's trillions and trillions of stars, and most stars have a system around it, so our sample size that we're going off of is very tiny. But there's usually like this accretionary phase where there's originally plasma. This is what we think. There's plasma, and plasma creates little dust grains that become bigger and bigger in size because they aggregate together, and then they eventually start to form planetesimals. And we see evidence of this in the asteroid belt right now, where because the distributed density of the asteroid belt is so much lower than it is for the other planets, it's probably still in that accretionary phase because it's a much slower time period for that to finally accumulate into like one body. Meanwhile, 80% of the mass of the asteroid belt is already condensed to 4 bodies. So maybe a billion years from now, there'll be 2 main things in the asteroid belt or something. But you have this planetesimal phase. This is what we think. 3i Atlas is probably one of those things flung out from some other system. But maybe it was something exploded, and then that was some ejecta from that. Like they just caught, I don't know how they did this. Supposedly, they observed an asteroid collision in a different star system using the James Webb telescope. Yeah, it must have been big because they registered that and they were able to detect that like blast of infrared light. And that's what they attributed it to, which is pretty wild. But we know that these collisions happen. And so maybe something launched off a billion years ago. We don't know the age. It's also possible if we bring in like the alien technology conversation, which is another angle a lot of people are going for with 3i Atlas, that maybe it was something that was hanging out in this cometary reservoir. Most people know it as the Oort cloud. We've never actually seen it directly because the brightness of these objects, if they are in this cloud going out to like 0.1 astronomical unit or 0.1 light years, very far distance, like 0.1 light years away from the sun, they'd be too dim to see. Until you get something out there, you're not going to see it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's possible that this thing was hanging out there, maybe a technology, and then it turned on and started zooming through. Like there's all we know, this is I like to bring it back to like, what do we know? We had our first observation of 3i Atlas on July 1st, and then we looked at some earlier sky surveys and picked it up in those. But we don't have any observations and able to plot where it is in the solar system before, I think, like April or May of 2025. So at anything before that is unknown. You can plot it back and maybe get a sense, right? It's coming in from the constellation of Sagittarius. But at that point, any idea can be played with and should be given fairly equal footing. But I mean, so we don't know if it's like a new class of comet or it's just like a space rock of weird characteristics. We know it has like this wide, diffuse coma, they call it, or cloud of dust and gas, and some of that's going to be plasma. So it's like a complex dusty plasma with it.
How big is that cloud now?
We don't know. When they measured it, one survey pegged it at 700,000 kilometers across, which is one of the videos that did well was talking about is half the diameter of the sun. Yeah. Now, obviously, it's not the sun in mass or also like in its influence, but still like a very large, complex, dusty plasma around this object that may be up to 50 kilometers across.
The center of the object may be up to 50, but the cloud was measuring 700,000 kilometers across.
And that was from Sphere X, which is very, very large. But it's probably larger now if it's been off-gassing more and more. We can't see it now. So there's all these traditional astronomical explanations that we can kind of go to for what 3i Atlas is. It's probably interstellar because of its orbit. But again, if we bring in the alien technology vector, maybe it was something that just accelerated to that speed of 60 kilometers per second.
Because of its orbit. It's probably interstellar because of its orbit?
Yeah, because you have, for example, Venus. The orbit of Venus is almost a perfect circle. Its eccentricity is almost zero. It's like 0.008. Whereas Earth's eccentricity, which goes from circle to like a bit of an ellipse, right, for Earth is like 0.014 or something like that. So Earth has a very low eccentricity orbit. Asteroids can have an eccentricity of like 0.3. Pluto is around like 0.3 something. Mercury is also in that zone. Comets will have eccentricities of like 0.99. Like they're very, very high, which means that they fly in very close to the sun and then they zoom out, and it's going to take them a very long time before they then start to round again in their orbit to then reach back and start to hurtle into the solar system again. You can calculate that based off of the measurements you take. And so the eccentricity of 3i Atlas is such that it's basically just going to pass through our solar system, and there's no indication that it's ever going to loop back.
Right.
And
so there is no orbit then, right?
Yeah, in that sense, yeah. In terms of like a traditional orbit around our star,
it's just passing through.
Yeah. Maybe there's some larger orbit that it follows in like the Interstellar cluster, something like that. I mean, our sun seems to kind of follow an orbit around the larger star cluster that we're in, and then there's the movement through like the galaxy overall that we hypothesize, but. Yeah, there's no clear orbit within our solar system. It's a hyperbolic orbit. It just passes through and it's deflected only just subtly by our star. But another angle, we don't have to discuss it much. It's really, what you want to talk about. But there is also the aspect of like, what is 3i Atlas? It's like, what do we want 3i Atlas to be? Because I think that's also a really big story here. There's the reality of what it is, but then there's also the like, what are people making it out to be? And how does that discussion affect society and the progression of human consciousness? And how does that reflect upon us too? It's just so interesting in my mind how it seems to be this like object or vehicle or just it's resonating with humanity to a much greater degree than most things that we find. We get a comet that zooms in that you can see, like last year's comet Shuqin-Shan, And that was great. I saw that with my naked eye. I was out at the beach, and there it was, like, setting after the sun went down. It was really cool, but it didn't capture the public attention like Three Eye Atlas. There's something about it that's like really grabbing people. Or the two other interstellar objects, Oumuamua, that captured people's attention really strongly. But then 2I Borisov, which was more like a normal comet, it seems to have been an interstellar object based off of its trajectory and stuff, but no one really talks about that much. So it seems to not have really resonated with us to the same degree. But this thing is really resonating with us at like an individual and societal level. So I think that's an important thing too, which you don't bring up in a normal like discussion of astronomy, let's say. But if you add in kind of like the more metaphysical and consciousness domain, now it all of a sudden adds a whole new playground for you to play with. And it seems to be linked to all that. It makes sense that something that's interstellar, that's beyond our normal like viewing range and concept of reality, is going to bring in these new kind of like perceptions of reality and therefore who we are, and pose a lot of questions. And it's resonating with a lot of people, and I think that's one reason why my videos have done well. A lot of other people's videos have done well, and it's interacting as a result, as like a derivative, like with all this AI stuff. So much AI content's being made on it, and that's kind of exposing some of the future directions that's going to go, whether we want that or not. And so it's just like a discussion piece. And it's probably just a space rock hurtling through. But it seems to be much more than that if we go to like the level of consciousness. That's kind of where I am.
Yeah, gotcha. And then so some of the additional oddities about this thing, like other than its pure size, I mean the direction that it came from was also the same direction that we got that WOW signal from in 1977, or I think. So the plane that it's on is like the kind of like the plane of the solar system. It's coming in within a few degrees of that plane. The outgassing was different than any other comet that we've ever observed. Can you talk about, I think the reason why it's capturing so much attention from the public is just how strange it's acting compared to other comets that we've observed throughout human history. I mean, can you talk a little bit about some of those things and what makes this thing so unique?
Yeah, strange is also relative. So there's certainly a lot of experiences that everyone has in their life that maybe initially strange, but then a few months later, a few years later, it's like, I've now explored a new aspect of reality. And maybe that's still strange to that person, but that person who experienced it, it's now in their lexicon. So it's strange in the aspect that this is the third ever observed. And as we were talking about beforehand, there's probably a whole bunch of interstellar objects. Like quantifying a whole bunch is difficult, but there's probably a few others in our system right now that we're not aware of because they're very dim. So if there's one that's on a hyperbolic trajectory that doesn't take it near the sun, but instead has it, let's say, sliced by the orbit of Neptune at 25 astronomical units, we're probably never going to see it. And especially if it's tiny, like a Oumuamua, which is very tiny, we're never going to see it. So like how many of those are in our system, right? Maybe they have a whole bunch of characteristics that are strange, but just because we don't have like a catalog of these things where we can really start to compare and contrast them.
So when was it first? It was first seen in July, and it was how many astronomical units away at that point? It had to have been past the orbit of like most of the even the gaseous planets, I guess, right? But
yes, that's a good point. Like we didn't detect it until it was already basically within the orbit of Jupiter.
Okay.
So I mean, at one point it was like, now I don't think Neptune was nearby, but it was at the orbit of Neptune, 30 astronomical units. At one point it was at the orbit of Uranus, 20, and then Saturn, 10. And so we weren't aware of it at all until it effectively hit that orbit of Jupiter. And yeah, I mean,
it's a big object to not be aware of until, for that long of a period of time, to your point.
Yeah. And yeah, so if you want to go into like simply from like an impact perspective, like if that thing was to impact us, because Chicxulub was like 6 kilometers or 10 kilometers across maximum, we estimate. This thing, if it's up to 50, right? I mean, like, thank God it's not on a trajectory to hit us. But we should think about these things and prepare accordingly, because we just see how much of our money is just being wasted. I mean, like, we're talking about the missiles and everything, like all the weaponry. This is so dumb when we could be exploring the universe and the cosmos. We have a Hubble around each planet, so we can, if we had a Hubble that was orbiting around Mars, we could get some really awesome photos of this thing right now. Right. But we don't. And I understand it's like a difficult logistical task, but if we're dropping precision like bunker breakers, like in some far off country, and then like the innocence, like, it just doesn't make sense what we're doing. And so it's also bringing up that reflection for us to think about. And it's just something about this is resonating with humanity. And because of its oddities, you could say, and how perfectly aligned it is, that's very synchronistic. And we see synchronicities across time. Just there are all these amazing stories of synchronicity. I mean, Carl Jung, he had his story of synchronicity with the golden scarab. Have you heard of that? There's all these across time. People have had them. This is like a human-wide synchronicity, like societal-wide. And I think it poses really good questions for us to consider and actually integrate, and not just kind of like, yeah, and then you move on. Like, there's knowing and then there's knowing, where you actually make the change, where the truth finally sits and like integrates within you. And a good example of that is your health and wellness. If there's something that you shouldn't be eating because you know it's not good for you, you're like, oh yeah, I know I shouldn't eat those. And then eventually, let's say there's a symptoms of some sort. Those symptoms eventually like become so strong that you can't deny it anymore. And then you actually make the change to no longer have that food, that trigger food. Maybe it's like an intolerance or something. That's what I consider like true knowing. You knew it before, but you didn't act on it. So you were still ignorant to some degree. But then there's a true knowing. Humanity right now seems to be in many things in this like ignorant knowing stage. We're like, oh yeah, we know this, we know that. But why can't we have a society that doesn't invest in warheads and bombs and stuff and mindless violence, instead, where we like spend that money and, investigate the cosmos?
Yeah, the bombs, the warheads could be out in space in case one of these things does decide to come directly towards our planet, and we could blow it up. Instead we're using the bombs on ourselves.
Yeah. This is the sci-fi writers, I feel like, really channeled a lot of information from, you could even say, the future. Like they really were peering ahead, and we've seen time and time again how sci-fi has become reality just in the past 20, 30, 40 years. And so a lot of these books on like interplanetary and interstellar warfare, or just these scenarios, I think we should take more seriously. And I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm a young guy that was raised on those books and they imprinted on me at a young age, and I feel like there's a lot of value there. But I hope that things like this 3i Atlas do trigger a shift in terms of how we actually treat each other, how we operate at a larger scale on the planet. Because Earth is amazing, it's great, but we are destined to kind of go beyond that. I mean, I think that's one reason why there's so much interest with this, is because there's this inherent, like, baked into our DNA and even beyond, there's this desire to explore the cosmos and the stars, because we've been looking up at the night sky for hundreds of thousands of years, and without light pollution, mind you, which is insane. When you see the night sky without light pollution, go to Big Island, Hawaii, and go up like 6,000 feet, and you're like, oh my God, it's insane. Mm-hmm. And there's better places on the planet too, I'm sure, like Namibia, the desert, right? There's tons of spots. So it's like, it's our destiny to do that, I think. Or at least a large part of our destiny is like meant to go that direction, and not just to engage in this primitive behaviors and patterns. Yeah. And we just need to snip those away and finally just like cut the cords and just move on. So It's cool that we're seeing Three-Eye Atlas resonate with so many people and across so many different disciplines. You have the astronomy people who are interested in it. You have all the spiritual people. You have people that are just more focused on like plasma that are interested in it, and people are interested in just consciousness without maybe some of the spiritual stuff. They're interested in like just across the board. It seems to be resonating with a lot of people. So
Yeah, for sure.
It's hard to give like a clear, this is what it is, but
Yeah, what is your percentage in terms of the possibilities of the probabilities of the various possibilities? Like where do you put a percentage on, okay, it's just a rock versus it's, something else? Like what are the options for what it is for you, and what probability do you assign to those options?
well, just because it's a rock, and I put that probably like 99%.
Really? Okay.
But just because it's a rock doesn't mean that it doesn't have some sort of intelligence or consciousness to it. Anyone that's like interacted with the mineral kingdom knows this. I mean, a good example, just recently I did a stone stacking workshop. And I've done that for a while now, because there's a few stone circles in my hometown that I'll go on a hike to, and I'll just kind of go out there and meditate, stack stones, and it's fun. And I mean, went to school for geology, and you interact with these things. And of course, there's millions of people that have crystals, and I think we got a whole bunch in here with these Himalayan salt lamps, right? There's a consciousness in the mineral kingdom, just as there's consciousness with plants and with fungi and with animals. And so this has just because it's a rock doesn't mean that it's not significant, is what I'm saying. So I think it's probably just a space rock, but why is it exactly lined? And all these factors, it's so close in, it's passing just by Mars and then pretty close to Venus and then just by Jupiter. Is that just coincidence? I think I don't think it's just coincidence. Is it being steered or something? I don't think we have to go to that explanation. I think we can just simply just leave it at like, this is some event destined by God. But maybe that's a cop out for some people, but.
So interesting. Okay. So then maybe there's three options: that it's just randomly chance going to where it's going, or it is sent by an intelligent force or an intelligent civilization of some sort, versus it's conscious itself and it's being sent or guided or steered by consciousness itself that exists within the rock or God or the universe or whatever it might be. I mean, if you had to kind of, say your thoughts between those three options, where would you stand?
I think the first one's the least likely, going to the most likely. So it just being just a rock with no consciousness or anything means that the universe is devoid of meaning. Because if the only consciousness is within me and then within you, well, we're a very small fraction of the universe, human beings. And this is just old programming. It's simply just old programming. You just do a little bit of research, you read through it, you see how this is programmed in, starting like the 1500s, about how humans are the only, life forms that matter, and everything else is there just for us. But then inherently, everything else becomes devoid of meaning. And I don't think the universe. We don't even know how it got created. Big Bang is falling apart. I think it's more likely a cyclical universe that kind of goes through phases up and down. But if the only part of the universe that has meaning 0.000000000 to infinity 1%, which is humans, has any consciousness or meaning, then why was it created, or how did it even form? Like, what's the point? There's no point. So my free will decision is that everything has consciousness and meaning. Everyone has to make their own free will decision as to what they think, but it empowers me to do that because now I'm part of a greater whole. And I've seen how that's influenced my life and helped me to connect more to myself, to other like-minded individuals, the earth, the sun, the cosmos. I think that's one reason why I've been doing pretty good with like the earthquake forecasting, because I'm connecting to the earth all the time. I have all my own synchronicities there. So I don't think it's just devoid of meaning, because that's boring and it's not fun. And that's just, personally, I don't choose that. And number two option, is it sent off by aliens or is it a ship or something? It's interesting. If it was, it would have had to been a long time ago, unless it accelerated and was traveling much faster, and then it slowed down because 60. We'll just use 60 kilometers per second for its velocity. That's fast, but I mean, on the scale of star systems, that's not fast. So if it's not from another star system, then that means they're in our solar system already. Now, I already think this is the case, but that would have to have been launched from fairly close by and accelerated. And, there's a whole bunch of people making content now saying it's sending radio signals out. I personally haven't found any evidence of that yet. And I'm pretty locked in on this. Doesn't mean I've seen all the evidence of everything, but if it was started hitting us with radio signals, I think I would probably know, and others it'd be well reported on. So there's a lot of just stuff that's being made up now. So if it's not doing that, how is it collecting information on us? And would aliens send off a rock precisely along this orbit to just hope for the chance of a collective consciousness shift on the planet? I think it would probably be outfitted with technology and do something. Maybe it's waiting for the superior conjunction where it's behind the sun on the 21st to deploy things. I think it's worth considering those and like preparing for those things. But I'm not big into that whole idea. I think there's a fear narrative that exists, more of a fear narrative around that. And I'm not here personally on this planet to live in fear. I want to live inspired. And that's also a free will decision. Like you can wake up and you can choose inspiration. You can choose how you look at something, whether you look at it with happiness or sorrow. So I personally choose the inspired timeline. And so this alien factor, I think, is more one of fear than inspiration. And I don't think that's probably what it is. If you ask me, what it actually is definitely not going to be anything that I say, right? It's going to be what it actually is. Anything we talk about in this room right now is just an abstraction of what it actually is. Maybe we get close. We hope to get as close as possible to you and I, but we're not going to get it exactly. Everything said in this room and every single podcast is going to be some abstraction of the truth, but hopefully most of it's really close and it's close enough that you're like, okay, that's fine. But I think number 3 is the most likely, where just because it's a space rock just means it's more of our own ignorance in identifying of what something is. And I don't even want to say label, because label in and of itself is limiting. If you put a label on something, now it's just that. So just a space rock is a label. So it's something, but if everything has consciousness, this thing coming in, moving through parts of the solar system where there's basically just a little bit of plasma and dust, means it's going to be changing that consciousness field quite a bit through that journey. Close flyby Mars, pretty close to Venus, close flyby Jupiter, perfectly positioned to not be viewable from Earth. So it's actually in some aspects the most precisely positioned to Earth, but in like in a void aspect, you could say, because or rather the Earth is like, I don't want to be anywhere near this thing because it's moving really fast. There's just a lot of the configuration is very interesting in that aspect. I think it's more so here to perhaps trigger an awakening. But I mean, my only evidence for that is the tremendous amount of interest in it, my own personal experiences. I feel like humanity is ready for a change. We've done thousands of years of this bloodshed thing. It's time to finally hang up the hat. Mm-hmm. You know, the ride was fun, guys.
Yeah, it's been great.
We've had a blast. But
everybody's really enjoyed the last 2,000 years of.
Yeah, it's time to move on and like step into our true responsibility of being stewards of the earth and making her an even more beautiful, bountiful place to live, which we can certainly do. Anyone that has ever put their hands in the soil and like grown a garden knows that to be true, nature's amazing, but when you add in the human factor, it's like 10x in its ability to flourish and produce like abundance. And then beyond that, once we get our own home in order, we can actually then start to expand out to the rest of the solar system, the cosmos, and engage that adventurous spirit. I mean, maybe we talked about this on the last one, but the like the explorers, the people who were going around and exploring the planet on ships in the 1700s, 1800s. I mean, those men were incredible. Or the expedition that got locked in the ice in Antarctica. I think it was like 1917 or so, right? And they're like subsisting off of walruses and fish for like 2.5 years as their boat gets destroyed by the ice, and somehow they almost all survive. Like, put the average guy, like probably including me, right? I don't want to I'm not pumping myself up. Put the average guy in that scenario now. I hope they can rise to the occasion. But there was something so awesome and powerful and just like masculine about men back in the day that is like missing now. And I think it's time we re-engage that in a very serious way. And the best way to do that probably would be to explore outwards. But we probably shouldn't do that until we get our own home in order. But
And how could it? So there's so many different ways we could go from here. That was, and I know that every member of the audience wants me to take this in a different direction right now. But I think the primary question for me right now is how would this object trigger a global awakening so that we could get this house in order, so that we could begin to, spend our resources on less combative things and more exploratory and unifying things. Like, what could this object do that could trigger a legitimate human awakening?
yeah, it seems to me that, and because we see things reflect across multiple domains, because like the underlying physics or reality is similar across everything. So you have often like this coiling up period where things are getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And so I think that's kind of where we are right now. This is increasing polarization in society, and all that stuff. Everyone knows it. I don't have to explain it. There's like this coiling up. Then typically there has to be like a catalyst. It's a catalyst that then sets everything off. With World War I, it was the assassination of, was it like the Serbian president, or Ferdinand, I think it was, 19 something, 14, 17, whatever, 12. Anyways, it requires usually like a catalyst. With World War II, America's involvement, Pearl Harbor was like the catalyst. Whether that was like the Americans let it happen or not, I don't know. But whatever it was a catalyst and got us into the war. A variety of things have acted as catalysts for like significant shifts in society that we can look back on. So for 3i Atlas to be a catalyst, it probably has to do something that defies our current understanding. So there's all these coincidences and strange things, and you could write all those down. And if it just passes through, then now we just have, in the logbook of characteristics, a new entry that will help us better understand future interstellar objects, because we're going to keep seeing them, especially as we improve our detection capabilities. But if it was to do its superior conjunction with the sun, and then we notice that, hey, we're not picking it up in the same place in the orbit where we expect. It's now actually shifted. Oh, wait, now it's going to be doing a close flyby of Earth. That would be a wake-up call. Like, I mean, I would hope so. If this thing all of a sudden shifted in its orbit such that no longer was it passing like 1.7 or something astronomical units, like we're not going to get that close to it. But all of a sudden now it's going to be flying within like 0.2 AU of the Earth, which is similar to what happened with Mars or Jupiter, or maybe even like, hey, it's heading like towards us. Like, I don't think there's a high probability, but if it did some radical orbital shift, that should hopefully be like a big catalyst, because then people are like, guys, we had all these cameras on Mars that were taking photos from NASA, and yet the government shutdown stopped us from seeing it. And then all of a sudden it shows up on the other side of the sun, now headed for us. Like, why did we elect you or any of this, right? Like, these are all just like small possibilities. But that would be the sort of catalyst I would want to see.
Directional change, for sure.
That could be one at least.
Yeah,
like, that'd
yeah.
be a big one.
Yeah, would we be able to capture much else about it? You know, I mean, obviously a velocity change might be a big deal, although Oumuamua had a very minor change in velocity, and that piqued some people's interest, and most people just kind of tried to explain that through other ways after it happened, without predicting that it would happen, of course, but explain it away afterwards. But a major change in speed and velocity would be another catalyst, I would assume.
Yeah.
Dropping alien probes would probably be a third.
Yeah.
If we could ever see them.
Yeah, I've had some dreams. I had one dream recently of these triangular UFOs. And so they weren't triangles, though. They almost looked like a ceiling fan, but instead of like the normal blades, it was 3 blades, like in a triangle pattern. And they were very like straight line, so it wasn't rounded or anything. And then the central body of it had 2 glowing light bars, but they were nearly invisible. And I could only see them if I like looked from the corner of my eye, but they were everywhere. Like they were all over the place. I was like, holy, and so I grabbed the rifle and I started loading that thing with rounds.
In your dream.
Yeah, I'm like trying to find ammo, but it was also kind of like an apocalyptic scenario, like the stream setting. And so, there's a lot of alien talk about it. And and you've had a lot of alien people on your show. My general thought about that is that I think there's already things like entities here. I think there's a lot of interdimensional entities that exist that we're just coming to awareness of, that people have experiences with, either lucid, sometimes on psychedelics, whatever. You can encounter them in your dream space. And so I don't know 100% what the truth is, but I do get a sense that a lot of the alien conversation is fear-based in order to just like harvest what they call loosh. You ever heard of loosh?
I don't think so.
It's like negative emotions and fear and sadness and stuff that certain things feed off of.
Sure.
It's a simplification probably, and it's one of these like things, you don't put too much into it. But I do get that sense that there's some like kind of conscious thought form creature thing, web network, whatever, that manifests itself into these caricatures that we see with like aliens and stuff in order to like harvest like fear energy, like they feed off of that. And so this seems, I think a lot of this, how this 3-eye atlas is being trying to be morphed into that by certain people. I think I'm not really vibing with it, because my personal experience is that it's really helped me to come to greater awareness of my own body and spirit, and it's triggered a really powerful like health transformational journey. And I've only detected good things. I'm not like, I'm just one person, but I can share my own personal experience. And I haven't detected any bad vibes from 3-eye atlas. I haven't detected any alien vibes. And there's just a lot of people making stuff up to make stuff up, and people are in various states of mental health. And
yeah, I mean, the bad vibes from anything alien would be coming from the individual themselves as opposed to the alien, I mean, it's like that. There's no reason to assume that anything extraterrestrial or interdimensional would have ill intentions. And if they did, then we would probably be blown up a long time ago,
Yeah, that's a deeper level too. It's like, was this actually percolating up within you?
Yeah.
And then working through those thought forms and feelings and stored emotions, maybe it's ancestral or not, whatever. I mean, it's a whole thing, right? Yeah, I personally don't get that sense from 3-eye atlas. I really, my personal thing, I just see it really as this wonderful, beautiful agent of increasing curiosity in terms of our place in the universe and what exists out there. And I see it as being inspirational. And I also see it as a reality check. Like, here are some things you need to think about. And we're manifesting that right now with this conversation too.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the last time you were on the show, you talked a little bit about your UFO experience that you had. And I think it was the first time that you'd publicly talked about that. So that was really cool. We made a short out of it. It's still going. It's still doing well. Actually, people are still watching it. I think they search your name and that pops up. But so you mentioned that that you think that they're here now, and that you think that extraterrestrials are probably here now in the solar system. And oh yeah, there's
the
from
black cube.
what you drew the last time. Yeah. Can you just maybe it's been a while since you talked about that experience, and I'm assuming that has something to do with your thoughts about them being here now, is the fact that you've experienced this and that it didn't seem human to you. But can you remind people about that experience quickly, and then maybe talk a little bit about what you think that what you saw? What do you think that it was?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was driving back from San Francisco up to my hometown, Napa, and there was this really bright light. Very similar to like an airplane going in for an airport, because you see those all the time. But the thing about it was that it wasn't changing. And normally, airplanes moving pretty quick, so it shouldn't stay in a fixed position too long. You could have it exactly lined such that you're kind of following that alignment so it stays in a relative position for longer. But so I was like, what the heck is this? It's very bright. And then I pass underneath it, and I'm on the highway. So I slowed down as much as I could. Thankfully, it was like late at night, but I am on the highway. But I look out the window and I see this black cube. And the only reason I saw the black cube is because there were these really dim red lights on the corner of it that just very softly illuminated like the cube.
All 8 corners?
Yes. Yeah. As far as I saw, I mean, it's very fast, but it's like I distinctly saw like a cube. And then in the center was like this pulsating light engine. I didn't see like an engine. I just saw like the gold and purple light. And it was just floating like 500 feet up or something. And it didn't seem to be moving. But again, like humans aren't perfect. So it was late at night and there's me in the car. Maybe this thing's moving. It was just very bizarre. Like if it's an airplane, I should be like, oh yeah, there's an airplane. But it was like a weird cube. But maybe it was an airplane. I mean, you can't rule it out. It'd just be bizarre for that. Based off of what I saw and kind of all the characteristics. And the weird thing is that like a week or two later, I was talking to some girl at Staples, and her and her friends like all live in that area, like Hercules, Pinole, in the Bay Area. And they're like, oh yeah, we've been seeing something fly around for like weeks now. So like there was that like little side anecdote too. Like, okay, like I'm not just totally crazy here. Like there are other people reporting things. But yeah, I don't really know what to think. I just see it's kind of a simple equation for me. It's like, okay, here we have the planet, and we see that we're here on the planet, and we see all these other life forms on the planet. And so I would think that there's probably some things that exist on this planet that we're just simply not aware of yet. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe some of them are smaller population numbers, but more technologically advanced. And because they can kind of hide themselves to a pretty strong degree. And maybe they are already interplanetary, interstellar. So they're zipping in and out. And, there's a paper that was recently published, the Palomar All Sky Survey from like the 50s, where they found a whole bunch of these multiple aligned object like transients, they call them, where they appeared in one sky survey and then 2 weeks later they were gone. But if they were something like an actual star or something, they should have been there. So it's clearly like just there and then just gone. So it's like, what was this? And this is happening around all the UFO flaps. I'm not the biggest expert on this. I read the paper. I've listened to a lot of people discuss these sort of things. But and we're kind of isolated. Like a lot of stars are actually binary, or there's triple stars, and they have different, there's a whole star cluster. Our system's kind of weird. That's just like one single star just kind of zooming through. And yeah, we have like Alpha Centauri and Proxima Centauri nearby, and then we have Sirius and a few others. But we're kind of like in a quiet part of the interstellar neighborhood. And this would kind of be like the one hot spot in this sector, you could call it, for there to be things. So if you did want to have like an established base in this sector, Earth would be this like the zone, or one of the other moons for Jupiter or Saturn or Neptune, maybe like Triton, like the big, like Titan or Triton, like the big moons. Some of them are bigger than Pluto and Mercury. So
Our moon, potentially.
our moon, Mars. I mean, I'm not a fan of the people that are like 100% definitive conclusive about, we know that there's nothing out there at all on any of the planets or the moon, because like we haven't even set foot on Mars yet. Yeah, we do have these nice like maps of Mars now, but if something's technologically advanced, then it could easily, I think it's like, oh cool, a couple satellites, like that's easy to avoid.
Do you think there's anything with Mars in the Cydonia region, like anything strange happening there? Like it doesn't seem, from what I understood, they haven't sent back. You said that it was basically mapped at this point, but I think they've steered clear of that area with the rover. They haven't like really brought it there to like to really inspect the face on Mars in any significant way, or that pyramid that's next to it, or there's that weird. I don't think it's maybe in the Cydonia region, but that square, what looks like some ancient underground structure, but I mean it's like perfectly square. It's very
Are you
strange.
talking about like a cave entrance? It looks like, is that it?
No, not the
Maybe that's
cave
something
entrance.
else.
That's a different one. This is like it's like a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. Yeah, that thing right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's strange. It's strange, So
I'm not the biggest expert. I just remain curious and open to it. I mean, it really depends on what the past. I think it really depends on the past geologic history of Mars, and where was it a billion years ago? I mean, we've seen how quickly, well, apparently how quickly human society has evolved in the past, let's say 5,000 years. If we bring into the fold like the great year concept from the Greeks or the Yuga cycle, then we're just actually now coming out of a period of low consciousness. And so the pyramids were built during a more enlightened period, which would explain how the pyramids are there in the first place. And some of these other technologies, like good example of this cyclical nature to human consciousness is the Antikythera mechanism, where you have this super advanced device, and then for like 1,000 or 1,500 years, you don't have anything like it on the planet until just recently with modern clockmakers.
Right.
So there seems to be this cyclical nature to consciousness, and we're just, according to the Vedics, we're just coming out of that. The bottom is Kali Yuga, and there's different dates for that. Some people put that as this year. Some people put that as 500 AD for being the absolute bottom of Kali Yuga. That's what makes sense to me, because 500 AD was like, the history books are empty. I read a whole book on 500 to 600 AD, and it's basically like, we don't know because the records is so slim, especially in the European Mediterranean region because of the fall of Rome. So that context, like we don't really know the full scale of human society and civilization. But as it relates to Mars, if Mars was more green at one point, had water, and the geology was different such that it could support life, then things could happen pretty quickly. And maybe there were societies on Mars. Maybe back during one of these more golden ages of human consciousness, we were more interplanetary, even just, let's say, 50,000 years ago. And we were on multiple planets. Like, I don't know. It's possible. It's fun to consider. I'd rather have fun in my life than just being like, no, that's 100% not it. And then from that castle of certainty, you're actually kind of weeping in solitude because everything, again, is devoid of meaning. And your life is devoid of meaning. That's the only place that you find any enjoyment, is to put other people down. But we have to, at the same time, we can't just like accept every outlandish idea as 100% truth and reality and roll with that. It's the tension of holding these things all together and just holding them, and not actually being like, I now 100% am a crusader for this.
Right, exactly. That's what this whole channel's about. It's like to keep open to different possibilities and to discuss what those possibilities are. And one of those possibilities with this conversation that we're talking about right now might be that 3i Atlas has this super close approach to Mars, specifically to Mars. Maybe because, a million years ago when 3i Atlas was launched, maybe Mars held life. Maybe Mars did have. I mean, it had oceans, it had an atmosphere. There's these odd shaped structures on there. It's coming from the Sagittarius, where that wow signal was detected, the radio signal. If we can maybe extend that out and point to a direction that it might have come from sometime in the far, far distant past, and explore those types of options, maybe we can, have some more interesting theories about what this thing is, as opposed to, just space rock.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the idea of there's like kind of two things that you can incorporate with Mars. One is that there was some very like solar system wide, you could say like cataclysmic event that stripped the atmosphere off of Mars. I find that interesting. I'm not saying I think that was the case. Who knows? Really, just who knows? But I do think that's interesting to consider because my personal thoughts are that the universe, our galaxy, the solar system is a lot more dynamic than we think it is. So I think these sort of things are possible. And certainly, if you did have a supernova beam, like directed, we happen to be like within that jet, because they kind of form these jets for the most part. If you did have a supernova beam like shoot towards the solar system dead on, like that would be pretty intense. So like maybe because Mars is smaller and maybe it was like at the brunt of it, and perhaps Earth was more shielded somehow. Like we don't know the dynamics. This is just an idea, but maybe the atmosphere is just like totally stripped off, and that then changed the entire cycle. Because we know with here on Earth, everything's connected together geologically, going from the magnetosphere, the plasmasphere, the atmosphere, down to the crust, everything. You disturb one system in a significant way, and the whole thing changes. And we also see how life has influenced the geologic evolution of the Earth. Like just the synthesis of oxygen radically changed Earth as a whole, because we used to have tons of iron dissolved in the water. Then the moment we started having oxygen producing microbes, this is what we think, right? But the moment we started having oxygen producing microbes, we started forming these red band iron sediment layers, and all the iron basically was mineralized out. And now we see clear geologic evidence because we have these, these red band iron layers.
You're talking about like Sedona and like where you can visibly see these red band iron layers in the rock?
There may be some there. I'm not sure. I haven't visited that part, but that's a lot of sedimentary rocks. But there's specific geologic layers that are super iron rich, and they form these.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah, and
right.
I'm not sure. Sometimes they come to the surface, but they're really old. So most of them got subducted down.
Okay.
So most of them are actually already been like kind of subducted down and probably reincorporated into Earth. But some of them are still visible. You often see them in really old places. I imagine you probably see some up in Canada and Scotland, which once were connected together. But just like that, the introduction of oxygen dramatically changed the evolution of Earth in a geologic sense, which would be a whole thing to explore. But that idea of maybe something happening there, or the other one is the idea of Mars perhaps being the site of some ancient nuclear apocalypse is kind of interesting too. You've probably discussed that on this channel.
Yeah, we have a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's also interesting. Whether I think that's the case or not, I don't know. What this face on Mars, whether that's just like the shadow, the photo, or whether, and the photos are all different from NASA. I don't know. But we'll have boots on the ground there soon enough. I would think there's a really good flyby opportunity coming up in like 2035 where we shoot, if we do this, where we launch something, we're going to kind of hit the orbit of Venus. It'll be a long trip to Mars, but we'll get there in, I think, like 2-3 years. But then the orbits of Earth and Mars basically line up such that if something wanted to come back, it's like 3 months or 6 months, and boom, we're back on Earth. So that's a really good opportunity that we shouldn't pass up. Hopefully this consciousness shift makes it so we're putting money in the right spot, to the right people, and people are inspired to do the work too. You need people working on these things. I don't know, but I think we should consider all this stuff. I think there's a lot. even just a basic thing, if someone wants to engage with this more, just read some good sci-fi.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah. What people don't understand, I think, a lot of times is like the quantum mechanics teaches us that things exist in states of in possibilities that have probabilities. You know, it's like Schrodinger's cat in the box, and you put poison in there. The cat is both dead and alive at the same time, you know, and it's not until we observe the cat that the cat actually becomes dead or alive. I mean, that it just has a possibility with a probability. It's not, and that's like at a scientific level, that's been proven over and over and over again. So like these speculating on, you know, things like Mars or things like are UFOs here, you know, to take that to 0% and say, you know, there's no chance that that's the case, and to just kind of limit yourself and be closed-minded. This is why the podcast is named Limitless. You know, it doesn't align with science and the way that things work, and which maybe you know, kind of argues for simulation theory, that things aren't rendered until they're observed. Like if you're, you know, a character in a video game and you go out into some other world, they don't develop that world until the character actually gets there, because they're saving space, you know. So it's an interesting idea, but maybe back for changing directions a little bit. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was that the Big Bang was falling apart. And can you talk a little bit, or potentially falling apart, or losing some of it's at least being questioned in a more significant way?
Yeah.
Can you explain what's happening there, and what the James Webb has kind of discovered, and why that's happening?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not the biggest expert, but there are kind of like certain pillars of the Big Bang. And it was, I'm more aware of like the history of it, because I've been reading a lot of Hans Alfvén's books and work and other things nearby. And so, I mean, there were people that basically right from the get-go were like, this is kind of a bogus idea. But things just get accepted and then carried forward. A good example is the standard model of the creation of the solar system, where it's just like a uniform disk of gas that then like coalesces into the planets. Meanwhile, there's like distinct density differences if we look at modern observations for the planets and their orbits. So there has to have been variation in that density of the disk, but we just like, everyone just kind of sees this uniform disk and everything slowly cools. It's just an old idea that is just outdated. And so there's a lot of people that were like bringing up good objections, and there are like certain constants which aren't constant, right? There's the Hubble constant. Well, people have measured that, and their measurements vary, like not huge, like orders of magnitude, but not exactly the same. The said could be same for the speed of light. As far as I'm aware, there are like very subtly different measurements that have been made on the speed of light, and that it maybe isn't a constant. Again, it's like very minor changes, but there seems to be wiggle room with some of these things. And there's also the big thing with the Big Bang is, where do you get the energy from? That's kind of the unsolved question, is like, where is the energy from? And there's not really good explanation. And the idea that everything like condensed down to some extremely tiny point that somehow contain everything, like the laws of physics didn't apply then and now they do. I think it's really just a mindset. Like I lean on the work and the writing of Hans Alfvén here, where he's just like, I'm more a mindset guy. Like, what's your system? And you can change your mindset too. So we can be adaptable and flexible here, but that's the good thing. But I really like his reasoning, which is we should start with what we observe and then work our way back as intelligently as possible, rather than just like creating something out of thin air and then doing our best to justify it with these equations with 50,000 variables that are always changing. And, you know, basically you can make anything fit with this gizmo that has a billion moving parts. So if we work back from what we know, then we arrive to a smaller universe, but not necessarily a singular point. And you can use, and what he talked about a lot is that you can use annihilation as the energy source that powered a lot of this. And that annihilation, the collision between matter and antimatter, or rather them combining and then annihilating, just releasing pure energy, could explain a lot of cosmic processes. Because when we're looking out there, again, I'm no expert, but when you're looking out there, you're just detecting in general the light across whatever frequency range you want. And so how do we explain that is the big question. So if we get a gamma ray burst, what's the mechanism? We've been using black holes and mergers and just weird celestial processes like this to explain that burst of gamma ray light. But it could very well be something else doing that. It could be a matter-antimatter collision that could explain that. There's so much more energy with annihilation than basically any other thing that we've found. So it's a very neat and elegant way to explain it. And yeah, there's a whole bunch of, again, I'm not an expert, but there's just a whole bunch of holes, it seems, in the hypothesis of the Big Bang once you get into it. And honestly, one of the biggest ones is the fact that it's a hypothesis, but people treat it as gospel. So that's also kind of like a little bit of a clue, like something's a little off here.
Well, shouldn't there supposed to be like an equal amount of matter and antimatter after the Big Bang? According to like modern physics and modern laws of physics, like we should see antimatter that's equal to matter within the universe itself, but all we see is matter everywhere. Like we're not detecting any antimatter. Am I correct with that?
That's exactly. I'm glad you brought that up because it wasn't on my mind. But yeah, that's like one of the primary things. And that's actually one of the first things I think the first thing I commented on 3i Atlas, because it was Interstellar. I was like, guys, is this antimatter? Now, I mean, we don't know, but like, because it's from a different system or somewhere, if there is an equal balance, and there probably is, this is what makes the most sense to me, is that it could be. Because yeah, they just explain, the Big Bang people just explain the antimatter imbalance away, that there's some little instability, somehow all of a sudden it just poof, it vanished. But if you were supposed to have equal amounts, yin and yang, which just like so deeply resonates with me because we see that reflected across everything, then where is it? And one very neat and elegant explanation is that there are divisions, and that there is a cellular structure to the cosmos across multiple domains and scales. And so we don't know if each solar system perhaps is that division, or maybe the star cluster is the division, but there's probably, this is what I think, there's probably a division where you have, let's use a star system. This star system is primarily matter, or koinomatter is what they call it. And then this star system is primarily antimatter. And at the outer edges where those systems meet, the density is going to be very low. The plasma, matter and antimatter plasma, is going to be very, very low. But there will be some annihilation that occurs. And that could create the background radiation that we see. But again, those collisions are very minor, and Alfvén specifically hypothesized, so again, this is a hypothesis, but he hypothesized these Leidenfrost layers where, because it's so energetic, you kind of get this natural repulsion that exists. So there actually isn't much interaction between them. And so his overall model of the cosmos is that you have this expansionary phase and then this contracting phase to the universe, where there's a lot of annihilation, which causes things to expand, and then eventually gravity does start to counteract it because it effectively cools off and then brings it together, and now you have this new annihilation phase that begins, causing an expansion, and you just have this constant pulsing from large universe to small universe. Now, that's not actually what happens. What actually happens is something way beyond our understanding. But that's at least makes more sense to me than some Big Bang idea. And James Webb, just seeing further and further and further back in time, lends a lot of evidence to that, because now people are like, wait, shouldn't this be like the warm soup period? And oh, wait, there's a whole galaxy that's already formed.
That's been there for like, yeah, that's like a huge galaxy, like big ones that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, and so I think what this is exposing is really our limitations of thought about how we get attached to things, and then we collectively, or at least a lot of people, then get flustered when they're like, "Oh my God, like that's not what I thought it was." It's like it never was, right? So it's very and maybe there's certain journeys that we go through societally, and probably that's one of the main things that we need to work through at a collective level in this 500-year period where we're examining our own limitations of thought and understanding, that we're not masters of the universe, we don't know everything, and that we need to be open and humble to new information coming in. And then what the next, let's say, the year 2400, we finally overcome that. We have probes all across the solar system. We're good stewards of the Earth, right? What's the next phase of our evolution then? I don't know. It's going to be something more conscious. But right now, I think a large part of it is encountering our own ignorance and just realizing that this is a journey too, and that we don't need to beat ourselves up over it. I mean, just kind of recognize it and then move on. But the cellular structure to kind of wrap up, the cellular structure to the universe makes a lot of sense to me. And because we see this in our own solar system, how they're like plasma forms these cellular structures where there's clear double layer boundaries and stuff. And so it's probably reflected across multiple scales. We already see that within ourselves, and then kind of going forward, right? We have our friend groups, right? We form like a little cellular structure, you, me, Ryan, everything, and you're in many, I'm in many, but we just see this reflected out across. And so there probably, this is what I think, but there probably is an equal matter antimatter, and that there are other systems or star clusters that are primarily composed of antimatter. I don't get the sense that it's at the galactic scale. It's probably, maybe it is each galaxy is one type of matter, but I think there's probably more mixing than that, because we see energetic things happening within our galaxy that could be explained by these processes of annihilation. So then if something is coming, anything that comes in from outside our solar system could potentially be matter or antimatter or matter. It could be either or. So we don't know. And so if there is any close, that was the first thing I thought about with Three Eye Atlas, is like, okay, the close approach to Mars, like what would, just as a thought experiment, if it was antimatter, what would a antimatter collision to Mars look like? Huge antimatter object, let's say 10 kilometers across, kind of put in the middle of what people may think. Obviously Mars is huge, but that would be insane. That would be another definitely catalyst for people are outside walking around, all of a sudden some massive explosion in space occurs. We would all notice that.
Like Mars is gone at that point, right? I mean,
Hopefully
Mars is like a new asteroid belt at that point.
I think the solar system...
That might wake people up.
Maybe. I would hope so. The solar system is just much more dynamic than we think it is. Thankfully, it is also stable. It's very stable. But here's something I read recently, which is really resonated. The life of a cow, God bless the cows. The life of a cow is very stable for 1,000 days, right? It's out there, it's munching on grass, it's sunshine, it's got its friends around it, and then it has a little bit of anxiety, then it's gone, right? Because it's slaughterhouse. So just because something's stable doesn't mean that is the full thing. That cow that was raised for slaughter, that was the end destination, was to become someone's steak. So the 1,000 days of stability was great for the 1,000 days of stability, but it doesn't define the system. That's not the end result. So you can have a stable system, doesn't mean that's going to be the end result. That's how I feel like a lot of things actually are. And we get lulled into a sense of security and complacency by the 1,000 days of chomping on grass. And that's true for us in a lot of ways, individually and societally. And that's just not how the universe usually operates.
It's like the interglacial period that we're in right now. Yeah.
Perfect example. Yeah. And we don't know when that's going to end. Can we avoid it? What creates these cycles? I mean, there's these Danberg-Oeschger cycles, probably getting that a little off. Maybe Ryan can pull it up. But these sudden spikes in warming, my buddy Max Raymond, who was at Cosmic Summit, he lined those up with supernova explosions nearby. So that's really interesting. I think it's really compelling that these influxes of cosmic energy can trigger climate shifts. And we see that with the medieval warm period. And it seems to be linked to solar activity because we see that during the medieval warm period, there was what's known as the medieval maximum in solar activity, but then you also had these supernova explosions happening. So I think our star and all stars are connected together more intimately than people think. In more ways than one.
Would we be able to see antimatter if it was like it would be visible? I guess like if 3I Atlas was antimatter, it would look just like it looks basically.
I guess so. That's what they say. But I mean, we've only made small amounts in like particle accelerators.
Right.
We've never observed it in situ.
Right.
So that's another limitation of this whole conversation is that we've never directly observed it. There's so many things that if you again boil it down to the basics that we don't know. Like again, like what was the orbit of this thing or the trajectory or its past path, you could say, before we first picked it up? We don't know.
Right. Hans Alfvén, that's how you pronounce his name. Yeah. So brilliant guy, right? From like was he primarily like doing the peak of his work in the 50s, the 1950s or so?
Yeah, like early, like 40s started coming on, and then 50s, 60s, 70s, and then wrote a lot of good stuff, like summary kind of work in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
And then seemed to, maybe he passed on in the 90s. I think it was the 90s. Maybe passed away 80s.
Okay.
Don't know exact life, but 1995 is when he passed.
Okay, so he was. You got to kind of maybe mention a little bit about who he is and the way that he thought, because he brought plasma into the conversation in a much bigger way than Einstein or anybody prior to his time really did. And it's like plasma is like 99.9% of the universe. It's almost everything that we can see out there is plasma, and the way that plasma interacts with electromagnetism and just, it seems like it's such a huge part of the equation, plasma. I really want to get into it more on the show and educate myself and educate other people about plasma and what it is and how it works. But what was Hans Alfvén's what was his grand model for reality, and how did plasma play a role in that?
So he spent a lot of time just kind of doing thought experimentation on the cosmos and the structure of the cosmos. And he has a fantastic book that I recommend everyone read. It's pretty expensive now because I think it's out of print, or it's like limited print, but called Cosmic Plasma. It's like 150 pages, but it's like dense in a good way. Dense in a way that, at least for me, it popped me out to like space every single time I read a new page. And I spent a lot of time. It took me a while to read through it, but I also had so many new insights that came to me. But he has a whole bunch of other books too. You could find these PDFs perhaps, and even if you don't want to devote the time to reading them, you could load them into Notebook LM and have it generate some podcasts for you using those sources. You listened to a couple that I made and you found them quite nice. I think they're fantastic. I think it's one of the best AI tools that we do have. That's reasonable. But there seems to be a better understanding of plasma from these people that were born in Northern Europe. Like Birkeland, I mean, he was seeing the aurora all the time, right? And he came up with an idea of what they actually were, and it wasn't until decades after that people were like, oh, Birkeland was right, and he developed the idea of Birkeland currents, and now we have observational evidence of that. And Hans Alfvén's from Sweden, and there's a personal synchronicity I have with him. Like, I'm in San Diego right now, and I bought this book, and then I find out it comes from he was coordinating with like the University of San Diego in La Jolla, which is basically right where I am. And the book actually was from like the La Jolla like library. It's like, oh, so like little synchronicities like that telling me I'm pointing, like I'm in the right direction. So there's some resonance that seems to exist between these people that are like there all the time, witnessing these things and understanding it, which makes sense to me. The more you're focusing on something, the more you're going to get from it. And he just did a really good job of, okay, what are our laboratory experiments telling us? What are they showing us? What are we observing in situ? How can we blend those two together and then build models based off of that? These are models. So they're not going to be 100% accurate. No model is. But let's use the evidence that we have and not just create things fancifully. And then if we are going to go a step out, so we can observe at his time is like we have probes in Earth's magnetosphere, which is a plasma environment, just but in the near Earth area, right? Okay, we can take that model of the magnetosphere and we'll do our best to apply it to the conditions that we do see beyond in interplanetary space. Then once we get probes there, we can refine our model with that new info. Well, we only have Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 outside the heliosphere. They're still in the transition zone. So anything basically outside our heliosphere is still just like kind of a creation of our best understanding of conditions here. That's where laboratory experiments come in. But he did a really good job of like building very solid footwork going from one to the next, rather than just a big leap of, I don't even want to call it a leap of faith, just a big leap of this is what it is. So he laid that out very nicely. That really resonates with me. And we do see these things also through our telescope observations. So we do have some data and evidence, right? We see these gamma ray bursts, and we know that there's certain energy required for these things and how that scales off as it travels across time. So you put all that together, and just a recognition of plasma too. Like, it requires us to think a little bit beyond gravity. We're in this, a lot of it's our thinking and in the history. Like, we're in this era of Newtonian physics, and now we're in that transition to quantum physics. But people are aware of gravity. We interact with it on a day-to-day. We actually interact in terms of plasma day-to-day too. Like, our biofields right now are overlapping. I could tune your biofield and start to manipulate the plasma. I just was trained in that a little bit. I'm not an expert, but he just brought one of these pioneers of greater awareness as to what plasma is, how it operates, and it's a greater awareness as to electromagnetism and how much more powerful of a force it is than gravity.
And plasma, just so people understand, is like you've got atoms and then the electrons are stripped off through a process called ionization, right? And so then the electrons and the nucleus of the atom, so the protons and the neutrons, are kind of in this constant state of attraction and repulsion with those free electrons, basically, right? So you've got the nucleus and now the free electrons that are constantly just kind of in this state of attraction and repulsion, and that's like lightning that you can see as a form of plasma, or is that basically how it works?
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's really to also add another level of simplification to it as well. It's just, what's the default energy of a system? Because if it's really, really low energy, like an energy void, then you have something that's near absolute zero, that's matter, with strong crystalline bonds. And there's actually a lot of energy within that, because you could split the atoms or whatever, but it's in this stable the stable potential energy that doesn't really want to do much. Then you add energy in. Eventually, we'll use water as an example. So you have this ice cube floating in space that's near absolute zero. Then you add heat to it, and eventually you get water. And then, of course, when we take pressure out of this equation, or else it's going to be too crazy. But now you get water, then you get vapor, and then eventually that will ionize and split into hydrogen and oxygen. And so now you have these two floating around. Then you can even split the electrons off of the hydrogen and off the oxygen as you just keep adding more and more energy into the system. So it's kind of just an energy equation. What's the energy density that's just inherent in that zone? My question is, like, why is there like this energy density there? Like, what's causing that spike to manifest and exist? And you can start to think about, like, do we get these waves of higher density energy just passing through our solar system, or just naturally manifesting? Like, how is that kind of manifesting out of the quantum field? And You could talk about David Bohm's work of the implicate and the explicate order and all these different things. We just don't really know. But plasma is this very high energy density, and it still forms these ordered, coherent structures. And the moment it has charge, it's now susceptible to the electromagnetic force, effectively, which is much stronger than gravity. And so gravity effectively becomes meaningless to something that has a charge. And this can be an ion. It can also be a dust grain. One of the things that Alfvén talks about a lot is just simply dust. And you can have a dust grain that takes on a charge of a few volts. But what we often measure is that these dust grains have charges of like 1,000 volts, 2,000 volts, because the little dust grain, whatever it is, will attract ions to it. They'll typically attract electrons and take on a negative charge, but if there's enough like ionization, like photoionization, then that can cause those to scatter off and it'll accumulate positive charge. So now you have these also taking on different charges. They're much bigger. They influence the electric field, the magnetic field, while they're also being guided by it. It gets very complicated very quickly, and you have this multi-body problem because instead of just tracking, for example, the two-body problem would be like Earth and the Moon. How do they interact with each other gravitationally? Then you could add in a many-body problem of, okay, well, we're going to add in Mars and Venus nearby and see how that interacts and subtly alters the orbit and things of, Earth and the Moon. But plasma inherently is like a crazy body problem because there's millions, billions, trillions of these things all interacting together simultaneously. So it's super, super fluid. So that's, I think, one limitation why it's not more well known or mainstream, because it's just so inherently difficult to model. And we have a lot of math, but math isn't going to fully quantify it. At least it isn't right now.
You think AI is going to answer a lot of these questions for us in the next decade?
We definitely know that a lot of people are going to think it's going to answer the questions for us because it will give you a result whether it's true or not. So it will give you an answer, but it may not be true.
Large language models for sure today are very limited based on what they're able to look up. But once artificial general intelligence starts to come on, and then artificial super intelligence is probably not too long after that, maybe a decade or so. But AGI could be here within the next 18 months or so, and when that starts to build upon itself, I mean, it's like we had that turn on switch going from 0 to 1 with ChatGPT 1, and now maybe we're at 5. But when AGI starts to learn and to build upon itself at an exponential growth rate of, just compounding and compounding and compounding, it goes from this to straight up with what AI is going to be able to do. And I think a lot of people now today are actually kind of like downplaying what AI is going to be able to do because they see the errors and they see where we are after a couple of years of just large language models. But AGI, man, people are not really, I don't feel like understanding what that is going to do. And even Elon Musk said, he's maybe just a couple of years away from having that. He might be first. We've got a guy on our board that's got a startup AI company. He thinks it's less than 12 months away from getting here. And once that gets here and it starts to compound and grow and multiply, at that exponential rate, I mean, I feel like a lot of these questions about science and physics and math and geology, like our world's history, like just plug in satellite imagery of, where just the globe. And I feel like it's going to be able to tell us so much about the history of the world and what's been impacted and how ice ages and, mass melting and just kind of like the Carolina Bays. Some of these mysteries I feel like are finally going to be solved here in the next decade, probably through AGI's ability to kind of give us some answers on some of these questions.
Yeah, I don't know when, if that'll happen. There's a lot of people think it's going to be very soon. Some people are very skeptical about it. I think it's a question of consciousness as well. But the important thing, let's say what you just laid out happens, and it starts to give us a lot of answers. I think the key will be that we do ground truthing. So this is where that inspirational aspect comes in. Because let's say we feed in all this data and it says, well, here's the plasma model of the solar system, and boom, there you go. It's then going to be our job to actually send out the probes to get the actual in situ observations that prove or disprove that hypothesis. Because when Einstein came out with his theory of first general but then special relativity, right? It wasn't until they actually took those observations of the eclipse that there was like confirmation. So it was like really good stuff, and it's like, okay, let's wait till we get this. Like, can we see the light curve and all that? So I think it's going to be a very similar situation if and when we get to that point with AGI that we just don't like. Again, it's this bigger question of like, where are we in recognizing consciously our own ignorance and taking the steps to move forward on that. So that's why I don't have a problem saying like I don't know, because I don't know. But if AGI gives us some crazy answer and it sounds awesome and everything, are we just going to be lulled into that and then just be like, oh, we know everything, and just like compound that issue even further? Or we're going to be like, great, awesome, thank you. We'll get back to you in 2 years. Help us design a rocket to get there. And maybe that's the proper way to start using these tools as I see it. Get the observations, and then we may find out it's like, oh, I was slightly off in that model, but these new observations now allow me to refine it, and now here's the new one. Oh, that actually looks a lot better now. Let's go out even further. We're always going to be one step behind, but that doesn't mean that actually means that if we follow that ethos that we're actually ahead. That's going to be the fastest way to progress. Because if we go through something where we think we know everything, but then we actually are ignorant, it's going to cause some sort of reckoning eventually where the system will collapse, reset, reboot, whatever. And I don't like, how is that going to look? I don't know. That's what I would think. But if it's not sustainable and true in the long run, like the truth always wins out, because the truth is the truth. So the fastest way to progress will be to always kind of be 1 foot back, 1 step back, and then go forward. Or the saying I think is with like the Army or the Navy, which is that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So I think that's my personal like philosophy and ethos. I'm just one person, one perspective, but I hope AGI can do all these amazing things and give us a better understanding, because if we speak about plasma, there's a lot of amazing evidence that it's much more important than we currently give it kind of credit for, especially in terms of the creation of our solar system and how the Earth formed and the other planets and what's active happening right now. And we talk about a lot of things in our solar system that like they don't have any plasma component to them. A good example would be comets. Like for some reason in the astronomical community, comets are like there's no electromagnetic component to them. Meanwhile, they have all these dust grains which take on charge. They're spewing out a whole bunch of gas, neutral gas, some of which will ionize in space. You have a complex dusty plasma now. We see, and they call it like, but there's also a recognition like, oh, there's the ion tail of the comets. Like there's the plasma tail. You just said it. But then at the same time, we're not recognizing that here you have this massive plasma engine flying through the inner solar system. How may that affect, for example, the solar wind or solar activity? Like we see a lot of clear examples where a comet will fly in really close, and then we get like a whole bunch of solar flares. Because if there's an electric circuit and you supercharge that circuit, and now you destabilize certain things and create explosions on the surface of the sun, then you can get that big, it's all about latent potential energy and the domino effect. And I don't have all the answers. I just feel like some of these things are kind of simple and common sense, and we see them. That's the thing. We just see them. And I'm hoping that AI can be used to look at all the past events and data that we have to then crunch the numbers to give us a better sense, because it's a tremendous amount of work. And so I would like to, if I could, do that myself in terms of sitting down and really like, I'm going to look through every single transit of comets that we know of in the past 70 years and correlate that with solar activity and solar flares. But that's like a tremendous amount of work. So I'm one person. And so personally, I would rather be a spokesperson for exploring these ideas, knowing that I won't be able to prove them myself, but hopefully others will look at this and, as proper scientists, set out to just examine what it is and either prove me right or prove me wrong. I don't care which. I don't care which, but you shouldn't go in with the bias of this or that. You should, if you are just wanting to properly understand it, you just crunch the numbers and see what the result is. And it may be a little counterintuitive until you kind of figure out the actual mechanism. But a lot of this data that we've collected, tremendous amount of data, amazing scientists who've done all the work, right, over 50, 60, 100, whatever years. But a lot of it hasn't been examined from these new perspectives and angles. And hopefully artificial intelligence can help us with that, because it's probably too much for us to do.
Good stuff, man. Love it. It's a great start, great first half of the episode. Let's take a break. We'll get a quick bite to eat. We'll come back and talk some more. I want to get into the poles a little bit with you, the magnetic pole movement that we're seeing happening, and some of the magnetic, like the South Atlantic anomaly potentially. And then you've done some amazing work with earthquakes and kind of predicting that. It seems like you're like the one guy out there, for me anyway, that has been able to predict with any degree of accuracy earthquakes. And so I want to have you explain to the audience how that's happening, how you're able to do that, how kind of anybody can probably do that, and what they should be looking for. But you've got some incredible success stories as it relates to that. So
maybe it's a fluke, but it keeps happening.
Yeah,
So.
right.
There's something to it.
It seems like it, for sure. So we'll come back and get into those topics.
Cool.
Awesome. So let's get right back into it, and maybe the poles. What's happening with the magnetic poles and how those things are moving, and your kind of take on, is there anything to worry about? Is this normal geologic activity or magnetic activity rather? And what's kind of your take on the whole situation?
Yeah. Last time we spent a good portion talking about this, and I think we went through the different like clarifications of like what does pole shift even mean, pole flip, right? Excursions, reversals. The real simple is a lot of people mix all of them together, and they're pole shift and pole flip are not technical terms, but to keep it really simple, pole shift we could just define as simple as the magnetic poles of the Earth moving. Earth has a magnetic field. So there's this force field that surrounds the Earth. It's generated internally. We don't know how it's generated. Other planets have magnetic fields. Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Mercury also has one 1/100th the strength. The strongest magnetic field in the solar system is Jupiter by far, other than the sun. The sun has the strongest magnetic field, extending all the way out 100 astronomical units. We're embedded within that. All the planets are embedded within that. We have our own little force field. And this is good because it redirects any charged particles. You're talking about ions. The moment something has a charge, it's now susceptible to the electromagnetic force instead of gravity. Gravity is being much weaker. So it's 10 to the 36 zeros stronger electromagnetism versus gravity. So gravity effectively becomes negligible, the force of it. So there's like this kind of boundary zone depending on the mass of something and its charge, where gravity and electromagnetism can kind of like balance each other out. So it's a really powerful force to be mindful of. The sun is always pumping out solar wind, which is full of plasma. It's mostly plasma. It's also dust, though, which we talked about, becomes charged, complex dusty plasma. This is interacting with the Earth, influencing energetically. You also have cosmic rays, very highly charged particles coming in from outside the solar system that hit the heliosphere. Some of them get redirected by the larger magnetic field of the sun. Some of them pierce through, hit the Earth, and then can even go down to the surface. And so that's cosmic ray flux. And these are very high energy particles. So like crazy high on the electron volt rating, meaning that if it hits you and interacts, it can cause a DNA break, like single or double strand, and that can then create mutations over time and cancer and everything. And the reason
that's how I got white hair.
That or you're a genius. Both.
I don't think it's the latter. Yeah, no, I'm going with cosmic. All right,
And-
sorry. Go ahead.
And so I laid all that out because Earth has this magnetic field that redirects these things around. And Earth's magnetic field is pretty stable, but it goes through what are known as secular variations. And there's a whole rhythm to these. There's multiple rhythms. And it's not 100% orderly, like here it is exactly by the book because a lot of people think this is the case, like every X years, this is exactly what happens. That's not the case. You look through the geologic record and there's like some trends, but there's mostly variability and chaos. And that's, in fact, most systems are not linear, but they're chaotic. And as humans, we often take things that are chaotic and we only have a short time sample and we look at them as linear, but they're not. We may just maybe see a small slice of a chaotic system that maybe is linear now. It's the whole thing, but it's not a linear system. So there's variations to it. The magnetic poles are where the energy comes in. It's kind of guided in the plasma and these cosmic particles. They follow these field lines because they're susceptible to them. So you get higher flux of these particles there, just like a higher count rate, effectively. Then you have like the South Atlantic anomaly, which we'll talk about, which is a weak spot in the shield where since it's weaker, these cosmic particles and just go in more. And this is relevant to us nowadays for a variety of factors, but one that we could discuss right off the bat is any satellites passing through the zone of the South Atlantic anomaly receive greater cosmic and solar particle flux. So they receive more charging and can have malfunctions and issues like that. Also, the astronauts on the International Space Station, when that goes through the South Atlantic anomaly zone, they receive a higher radiation load. So that has like a real world implication in the day-to-day. South Atlantic anomaly is important on like a geologic sense if we're talking perhaps about like a magnetic excursion or reversal. So pole shift is just that the poles are moving, right? It's literally a name, pole shift. But does that mean they're going to reverse or flip? No, it's just it's not nonsense, but it's just a phrase that people use and they attach all this meaning to it. But I like to step back and just be like, we can use that phrase if we're talking just about the poles moving. Pole flip is if they were actually to switch places, which happens. That's a technical term, would be a geomagnetic reversal, where the North Pole and the South Pole change positions and they stay changed. And that happens, again, chaotically. We don't know. Last one was 780,000 years ago or so. Then there's periods of time in Earth's history where we didn't have a pole flip or a reversal for like dozens of millions of years, even like 100 plus millions of years, like long periods of stability. Then there's other times where you're getting pole flips literally like nonstop, like all the time, like 100,000 years later, 200,000 years later, 50,000 years later, boom, 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 boom.
And isn't that kind of like the more recent trend? Like in the last couple of million years, they've been basically every 300,000 years, except for the last 750 or whatever thousand years. Like prior to the last 750,000 years, hasn't it been kind of consistently like 200,000, 300,000 years apart for a couple million years?
Let's have Ryan pull up the geomagnetic reversal record for the past 5-10 million years, and we'll check it out.
Yeah,
you should be able to pull up some records that go back further too. But yeah, it's pretty random.
But no evidence then of that like 6,000 and 12,000 year cycle thing, that it's like a cyclical thing, and that there wouldn't be that we wouldn't have the ability. If it was a quick flip, would we have the ability to even know that it happened?
Like in the past?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would be. It really depends on whether we had something that captured that. But regardless, yeah, there we go. Yeah, probably one of those ones right there. But if it's really fast, was there some sort of volcano that was spewing lava that then cooled down and captured that reading as remnant magnetization? That'd be the key. And How fast these things can happen is kind of an open question, because there's some evidence that it's like further back, like 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, it was like, okay, this takes a few thousand years. And some evidence has come out that's a little faster, it can be faster than that. But I personally haven't read anything or seen any evidence of it being faster than hundreds of years or hundreds of years. So that seems, based off of my research, and I've done a ton into it, that seems to be kind of the fastest. But it also depends on what time period you're looking at. If you're looking, because there's a whole bunch with this that we'll get into, but there's a critical period where the field gets really weak during either excursion or reversal, and that seems to be like 100 years in length. So if you're only using that as your time window, then yeah, it's fast. But the whole process seems to take hundreds of years, if not like 1,000, 2,000 plus years. So yeah, an excursion is when the poles move significantly such that it's kind of like a reversal, but then they don't stick in place and then they go back. So then to answer your question, there are various levels of excursions. And the biggest one that we have a record of recently is the Lechamp excursion. That was about 40, it's like around the time of the Neanderthals and when they went extinct, effectively. So like 42 something thousand years ago, right around there. We have a really good record of the Lechamp excursion, specifically from some buried tree trunks and logs from like New Zealand, which gave us a really high resolution record of the Lechamp excursion. And that one stands out because it's a very clear like signal. We have tons of records from around the world, so it's like clearly represented globally. And it nearly flipped, but it didn't. You go further back, you find other excursions, but the signal strength, you could say, fades off. You don't have as many data points around the world. And you go closer in time, and we have other examples of excursions, but the intensity was weaker and also not as globally representative represented. So that really tells you something, because as you get closer in time, the signal should be stronger and stronger because it's more recent. And if it's not, then that means that that excursion was not as significant as Lechamp. Lechamp was nearly reversal, but it didn't happen. So we kind of have to pin, in my mind, you have to pin to that first one. And then from there, see that period, the Cretaceous, where it's like, was that like 50 million years of one of normal polarity, right? Like that's really quite striking. And then, yeah, if you zoom in, it looks like they've become more regular, you could say, compared to that very long period of normal polarity. That's the bottom there, the Jurassic. But if you go up, but in general, like this is also on the million-year time scale, so it's kind of hard at that point to see the relative differences. But yeah, I mean, there's kind of a regular rhythm. Probably we could probably guesstimate it to like once every 500,000 or million years, something like that. But it's not as perfectly rhythmic as maybe some people make it out to be, as you can see, right? I think that's pretty clear. But there's, again, multiple ways to interpret this stuff.
And this is based on what? This is based on all of the best scientific knowledge that we've measured of like drying, like of drying magma, or like how are these, like how are we getting this data here, and how are we sure about it?
This specifically, the reversal data is most accurately shown with the remnant to magnetization of the oceanic crust.
Oh, right.
Because you have the mid-ocean ridges
Right.
constantly producing, and there's three types of rock. There's igneous rock, sedimentary, metamorphic. Igneous rock is the volcanic rock. It's very high in these magnetic minerals like magnetite, titanomagnetite. And so it'll lock and configure to the magnetic field at the time. And so that allows us to track what is happening. And when we first deployed ocean-borne magnetometers, yeah, exactly. We picked up, oh, hey, it looks like this has this polarity, and then 50 miles later has this polarity, and oh, we're getting this weird striping on the seafloor. That's what helped us figure this whole thing out. So in that context, also remember that this is like a new discovery. Plate tectonics is a new theory that has a lot of evidence. So like we're babies in terms of understanding all of this too. So I don't think we can be like conclusive on any of this stuff in like 100% like boomed like definitive way in either direction or whatever.
Could there be a reason why there wasn't one for 50 million years that could be explained by something else? Could that be a false read? Because it's really strange to have that 50 million year period or whatever it is to of normal polarity as opposed to reverse polarity, and every other time period is essentially it's just flipping like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth.
Definitely at a higher frequency. That if we say it's a long period
Yeah.
secular variation, then
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, maybe in 20, 50 years, we have like a higher resolution record there, but uh, I haven't seen anything about that not being like pretty accurate. Maybe there was a whole bunch of super high frequency flips that occurred, very fast duration, like boom, boom. And we just don't have records of that because it's too far back, but we have similar records going further back. So,
Or could the ground have been somehow like demagnetized, or like something about how we're measuring that ground area? Could it have been hit with some space impact, or could the Earth have gone through some change that would have removed the magnetic variance that we would otherwise see? Like, is there anything that comes to mind that could be possible? Because it's such a strange to see that much time go by with it almost seems like, okay, we'll figure that out in another 50 years, why we're stupid humans didn't realize that there was something else that we weren't thinking of, kind of a thing.
maybe I don't know. I think we could definitely, and this applies to what's happening now, is we can look beyond the Earth for perhaps some understanding of why it was stable for so long. Because there seems to be a connection between Earth's magnetic field, the sun, and the interstellar environment. So if you were in a fundamentally different interstellar environment and the sun as a result was in a fundamentally different state, then Earth's magnetic field perhaps was fine being stable for a long time. But it's also due to what's happening with the core because the magnetic field is generated somewhere inside the Earth. I mean, again, it's like the Big Bang where we have these ideas, and because we've just talked about them enough, people just 100% believe this is what it is. But I don't know what's happening in the core. And it's similar to the plasma stuff. Like people in the labs have taken, we know like the bulk modulus and like the density of the Earth, and due to like chemical differentiation and fractionation, like we can get a pretty good sense of what the density is of the core. And then if we kind of have a sense of what that elemental breakdown is, then we can start to play with that in the lab and put under different temperature and pressure regimes and see what sort of crystal structures that they form, like the actual crystallography of the core. And so there's a lot of evidence that the core, the nickel iron core, has like a hexagonal matrix to it. So it's not like we're clueless. It's this combination of like some of the measurements we have seismically and gravity based with laboratory, and then we use those to give our best guess. But we also just fundamentally don't know what's down there. So the typical idea, and I promise the viewer we're going to get everything wrapped up nice, but the typical idea is that there's some sort of geodynamo within the planet that's generating this magnetic field. So there's some movement of charge that's occurring that generates these magnetic fields going out. And the magnetic field is going to be generated perpendicular to the electric current. So the electric currents have to be spinning like this vertically for the magnetic field to go out, or horizontally, you could say, for the magnetic field to then go out in the polar regions like so. And if there's a change to that, then that could explain the shifting poles, even excursion, reversal, or just the field getting weaker because the geodynamo gets weaker, the field getting stronger because the geodynamo is strengthening. What's driving the geodynamo is kind of a big question. You have the Earth rotating, you have tidal forces from the sun, the moon, you have all these things. One thing that is not talked about much, but just like really resonates with me and just makes so much sense that I have to include it in my understanding at least, and we'll find out maybe one day who's right or wrong or both. I think it's both. But I think we can't ignore the georeactor hypothesis, whereas that you have a natural enrichment of uranium such that natural nuclear fission occurs that's self-sustaining. Because if we're already basing the Earth off of denser things sinking down, then yeah, most of the uranium and other fissile materials are going to sink down. And there's also been geologic evidence found in the crustal layers. I think there was one in France that was found of a natural georeactor pocket where it seems that there was evidence of there being ongoing nuclear fission for a while. I mean, this is geologically old now, died out. But there's that evidence, I believe, from France. And so if there is this georeactor, then you have uranium 235 like splitting, but then you can also get uranium 232 to get re-enriched because neutrons are coming in, making it unstable. And it's this whole thing. I'm not a nuclear physics expert, but the key thing is that you're going to have light element production and energy release. And there's a long running question in the geology and geophysics community of like, why is the Earth still like warm? Like, how is it still its heat budget? That's like still the big ongoing. How do we account for the heat budget? How has that guided the evolution of the Earth and fit with our geologic evidence on the surface? Well, if you have a georeactor,
Are you saying there's not enough warmth from the sun to keep the Earth this warm for 4 billion years or something? Or
yeah, the idea is that a lot of the heat came from the initial accretion. And then as the inner core cools, that actually releases heat too, kind of like exothermically. That helps keep the Earth a certain black body temperature because it's always radiating like long way of radiation out. So if it's losing heat, but it's maintaining itself pretty much, how is it doing that? So there's like more at play than we really fully understand. And this georeactor idea helps explain the formation of the geodynamo, also helps explain why we have these light elements in such abundance. So one of the, we have all these, for example, helium deposits. And like they hypothesize that most of helium is actually down near the core or around the core mantle boundary. But helium is very light. Everyone lights a balloon and just shoots straight up, right? Same with like hydrogen. You know, they're light elements, and we see things coalesce with density. So why is there so much helium in the core? It doesn't really make sense unless you have active production of light elements from a georeactor, and one of those being helium. Then that could replenish the helium and cause there to be a natural seeping out of helium. And there's certain isotope ratios that seem to match up with this, that for some reason the scientific community, based on my research, again, I'm no expert, but based on my research, that they're just not taking it seriously for some reason. But if you have light elements and a lot of charge, this is creating plasma, and the flow of that charge can create that geodynamo. And the question of like, well, why does the magnetic field go through changes? Well, the georeactor is not just like one perfect spherical thing. It's probably kind of dendritic and fractal and all over the place, and dendritic is really kind of the word. That's what seems to be the case with the structure of these sort of things. So you could have pockets that turn on, then pockets of the georeactor that die, and that would influence the magnetic field in certain places, and that could explain these flux lobes that push in and out of the Earth, like the South Atlantic anomalies, or a patch of reverse flux. Maybe that's because you have a little geodynamo that's closer in, that's opposite the normal flow of the rest of the georeactor. So it's canceling out the magnetic field there, but maybe that'll die out over the course of 500 years, and then the normal field will push out again because that little pocket died out. So like, we just don't know what's happening there. We have very limited measurements with our seismic and with our gravity and with some of our laboratory results that we can kind of piece things together. But there's certain things being added in that if you add them into the equation, help it make more sense, at least to me. And one of those is georeactor. But the magnetic field is going through these changes. Sometimes it's excursions, and There doesn't seem to be a superset rhythm on that in terms of when and the intensity. Sometimes it nearly is a reversal. Sometimes it is a reversal. Sometimes it's just kind of like a weak one, but it's not like you look at the record and it's like, whoa, there's like every something, it's kind of sporadic. Then there's also where are the ones that we haven't found yet, or we just don't have evidence of. Like we've only been searching for this stuff for, we weren't even aware of this until we did those ocean magnetometer surveys in like the 50s, right? So this is all really new stuff. So I just approach it all with a like, let's just kind of wait and see what's happening, and our primary focus should be just getting observational data. So some new results just came out from the European Space Agency based off of their SWARM constellation that showed the South Atlantic anomaly expanded in size from 2014 to 2025. That time frame is used because that's when SWARM was launched.
So, handful of questions.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch.
Yeah, there's a lot there. But interesting theory and super fascinating. And I feel like AI is probably going to be able to tell us what the truth is in the next 20 years just by giving it enough data and information about what we know. It'll be able to give us probabilities of the possibilities of what's really going on within the center of the Earth, and what's actually happening, and maybe even be able to predict things like pole flips and earthquakes and volcanic activity and whatnot. But if you don't get there first, but
I am the AI.
yes. And then, but so what, I guess a handful of questions maybe, or thoughts on like what's happening right now from the best that you can kind of tell as to what's going on with the poles and with the movement. You mentioned SWARM. Is it true that the magnetic field weakened by 10% from 1859 up until about 2010? And then since then, has it decreased by another 5%? Are those, I think the 10% is for sure, everybody agrees upon it, but I'm just not sure about that additional 5% because that would signify significant weakening of the Earth, of the magnetic field very quickly. And I know that the field is like at an all-time high, like it's stronger than it's been for a couple of million years. And so it's coming off of a peak in 1859 that was like, it's like in the 94th percentile of the last couple of million years. So it's super high. But is that data accurate with the additional 5% decrease in the last 15 years, or and if so, great. And if not, why and where did that come from?
Well, Ryan could pull up that ESA article, and there's a link to the actual research paper in there. And in the abstract, it gives the specific numbers for the decrease in the South Atlantic anomaly and for the Canadian flux lobe over that 11-year time frame. And it also gives the number for the increase in the Siberian flux lobe during that time frame. So I'm sure he'll be able to find the link to that study. It should be, latest results perhaps. But just going off of memory, the South Atlantic, that intro part, just, so right there, at the Earth's surface, we find that the region in the South Atlantic where the field strength is weakest, below 26,000 nanotesla, has expanded by 0.9% of Earth's surface area, and that the minimum intensity is decreased by 336 nanotesla from 22,430 nanotesla to 22,094 nanotesla. Well, we can now calculate our percentage, right? Because we have the difference and we have the total values. So Ryan could also pull up a calculator pretty quick and compute that difference. But if you were to do 10% of that would be 2,000 nanotesla, right? So that looks closer to about 1.5% or so.
Yeah,
so it's not 5%.
Yeah,
just based off of that. And that's for the South Atlantic anomaly. Now, if you do go to the Canadian flux lobe, we find that the area in Canada with the strong field, because there's 3 zones on Earth where the field is really strong. You have the pole in the southern hemisphere, which is a positive magnetic pole, and that's the technical north magnetic pole. That's near Antarctica. That is the strongest part on the Earth for the magnetic field. But then you also have 2 zones in the northern hemisphere, which is odd. That's another thing that, why are there two high, strong field zones in the north and only one in the south? There's this asymmetry that the standard models have a hard time kind of nailing down. That if you have a little bit more of a chaotic random georeactor setup, maybe that can help explain that. But the Canadian flux lobe has been getting weaker and quite quickly, but the Siberian one's been getting stronger. So more magnetic positive, strong magnetic flux is pushing out in the Siberian region while the Canadian one is diminishing. And there's evidence across time that they oscillate.
So this is why the North Magnetic Pole is rushing very quickly past the North Geographic Pole and into Siberia. It's because the flux lobes are changing. The flux lobe over Canada is getting smaller, over Siberia is getting larger, and so it's pulling that North Magnetic field into Siberia.
That's the best evidence. And there's actually a graphic I've posted to my Twitter X that shows the reconstructed movement of the magnetic North Pole over the past 2,000 years, from 200 AD up to the modern day, and it shows it goes through these circles. And that was drawn from sedimentary layers collected right in the Arctic Circle, there's a distinct zone difference if you go from the Arctic to lower latitudes, so like high mid latitudes, and then below that, the magnetic field behaves a little differently. And we see that very clearly with these strong field regions. But the Siberian flux lobe strengthened with this most recent ESA swarm data from 2014 to 2025 it also says in that abstract intro, by like 300 something nanotesla. The Canadian one reduced by 801 nanotesla, as we see right there. So, or the Siberian one increased by 260. So those are just certain zones, though. If you take the Earth as a whole in total, it doesn't make 5%. So look, this is some of the best data we have on the position of the magnetic North Pole for the past, effectively, 1,800 years. And you see each one of those dots is 50 years. And you see that some of those movements in 50-year timeframes are quite rapid. And I layered in 2025. So it's a green dot. It's kind of hard to see, but you'll notice that our location, the magnetic pole right now in the northern hemisphere, is right next to the actual North Pole. So it's not that deviated off in that regard. It's the one in the southern hemisphere, which is skewed off the axis, whereas 150 years ago is the opposite. It was our field in Canada, which was skewed off of the North Pole, South Pole axis, and the magnetic pole in the southern hemisphere in Antarctica was actually right near the South Pole. So they effectively just flip-flopped in their skew, which is interesting, but it's not, at least that at least is not signaling that we're like the Earth is about to explode or something, right? But if you see periods here where in 50 years it moved quite dramatically based off of the sedimentary record from some of these lakes in these high Arctic areas. And you can see where they were collected in like Baffin Island and Murray Lake and Sawtooth Lake and near Greenland and stuff. So I read this study. I thought they did a really good job laying it out, and I applaud the people that are actually trudging out there in Canada in the cold, right, collecting this data. And so I don't disparage these people and say that what they collected was like wrong or something. It's probably pretty close to what actually was happening. But yeah, it kind of goes through a circular loop. So it seems that these flux lobes have been existing for a while, and that they kind of oscillate back and forth, and that moves and pulls the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere between the two flux lobes. And across time, to kind of hopefully wrap it up to some degree, across time, we see that there are these flux lobes that push out from the Earth of either weak strength, like they're reversed, so the field weakens, or the field actually gets a lot stronger because it adds together constructively. So the field was strongest 1,000 years ago, and then also 3,000 years ago. There was a dip in between those two periods. So this would be 1,000 BC, and then 1,000 AD is when we had the really strong field. And then since 1,000 AD, we've been declining, and yeah, we're down about 12.5% or something like that since 1850 or so. But it's nuanced because Earth's magnetic field, again, it's being generated by some mechanism in the core. Most of it, like 99 something plus percent, is being absorbed into the mantle. So that's another equation that like a lot of people don't recognize. And there's magnetic structures in the mantle. So usually people think of the mantle as not being magnetic, but they found some of these features like underneath the crust, not too deep in, but underneath the crust that seem to be cool enough to retain some sort of magnetization. Because normally if you heat things up beyond a Curie point, it loses its ability to be magnetic, but now it's electric, which means it's influencing the magnetic field that way. So that's also something to keep in mind. But there's these large magnetic structures in parts of the globe that exist that's going to influence the magnetic field before it reaches the surface. And then the moment it hits the surface, you now have the atmosphere, the air, and the magnetic field, boom, it shoots out. It's not being absorbed into the lower atmosphere effectively because it's very, very resistive. So the magnetic field isn't, you need something conductive to absorb that magnetic field. So now it's decaying via inverse square law. That radiates out. But the moment you get to something that can produce magnetic fields, now you have to add that into the equation. So the moment you get to the ionosphere, Earth's uppermost atmosphere, that's like the strongest layer is usually about 300 kilometers up. And Earth's magnetic field decreases via the inverse square law to that zone. If you're going to talk about Earth's magnetic field in the ionosphere, you have to talk about these ionospheric currents that are created during like a geomagnetic storm. They're always there, but they're strengthened during a geostorm. And so how does that part of Earth's magnetic field change across time? Because that's an important part of our shield. The magnetic field can have a certain strength near the surface, but if the sun is really weak for a long duration, then the ionospheric currents will be reduced, and maybe our magnetic field actually doesn't extend as far out as we may think it does, or the behavior is going to be different. Then you have the plasmasphere, and so you can only take each step can only go so far until you reach a new system that you have to account for. This is what Hans Alfvén talks about a lot in his books, because it's like we had a simple idea of the magnetic field for Earth. And before we sent probes out into space, we thought it was this perfect dipole, and we thought that space was a vacuum. And that the only time space wasn't a vacuum was when a solar storm hit us. But other than that, there was no solar wind. It was devoid. And then the moment we launched probes out, we were like, oh, guess what? It's actually constantly being bathed in solar wind, and then it gets enhanced during a solar storm. So the original model of the dipole field, just a very simple dipole, was totally thrown out the window the moment we actually sent probes out. But a lot of people were, this simple model is gospel until we actually did the thing. And then we did the thing, and now you look at the magnetic field, the magnetosphere models that they have, and they're super complex, right? They have like there's like the magnetosheath and magnetopause, and it depends on the configuration of the solar wind, how the magnetic field operates and connects in at it's like super complex. So it went from a very simple model within like 20, 30 years to a very complex model because we got the observational data. So as it relates to the magnetic field flipping, or just the magnetic field in general, you have all these internal dynamics and you have the external dynamics, and they all work together because it seems that Earth's magnetic field undergoes these excursions when the stellar environment is different. Like we don't, I'm trying to cram as much as I can in here at once, but one of the main pieces of evidence that we have of the magnetic field reducing is that cosmic ray flux is a lot higher. Because we measure radioisotopes, and those will go up, like carbon-14 or something. So this study that they did in New Zealand, they found this tree trunk and it's buried. They showed that Earth's dipole field went to like 5% of its strength of normal. It seemed to have perfectly captured the bottom of the Lechamp excursion when the field is the weakest. And you have the dipole field, which is just a north-south like this, but there's a quadrupole field where you have multiple magnetic poles. There's an octopole field, so 4 lobes, 8, and there's all these higher order modes. It gets complicated, but what happens during the excursion or an excursion is the dipole weakens. This is the geologic evidence is suggesting that the dipole field weakens significantly, like 5% of its normal strength, while the quadrupole and octopole field and other higher modes effectively stay unchanged or maybe even strengthen a little bit. And then the dipole field reemerges in a new flipped configuration. And we don't know exactly what causes that. Excursion is where that aborts and it just actually reemerges with its normal polarity. And so it's less about poles moving across the Earth, less so, it's more so just like the field just kind of vanishes and then reemerges. So the pole location doesn't really matter much because that's just kind of an arbitrary like measure of where the field may be vertical. But the bigger picture is just that the dipole field just collapses or disappears.
It reverses magnetism.
If during reversal
versus polarities.
And it usually strengthens afterwards.
But could it be that it just happened so quickly that there's no record of that from like a magnetic standpoint or geologic standpoint, or like within the trees? Like it just seems like it popped up and reemerged. But if you were sitting there on the surface of the Earth with a compass, that you would actually see it, moving over the course of several years or 100 years or whatever.
Well, this tree record, this super high resolution study in New Zealand did capture that. And it seemed that lowest field period was about 100 years in length. And so as that relates to us here on Earth, and why I started with the whole cosmic environment is that when the dipole field goes away, the overall magnetic field of the Earth is much, 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 much weaker. That means we're going to get much higher cosmic ray flux coming in, which now has like an effect on mutations and DNA breaks and everything. So
silver hair.
Yeah. So you would be concerned about this. If your question was kind of earlier about like, am I concerned, or like you'd be concerned about this if you're going to be receiving a much higher cosmic flux environment. And here's the thing though, there's multiple factors that influence radioisotope levels on Earth. It's not just Earth's magnetic field modifying them. It's also how strong is the heliosphere, because that's the first boundary of its modifying it. And then it's also what's the cosmic ray variations. Maybe for some reason a lot of stars are pumping out tons of cosmic rays and there's a lot of supernova or something like that. We can't ignore those secular variations that undoubtedly exist. What's the frequency, the intensity? We don't know any of that, right?
Do you think that it's like a coincidence that the north magnetic pole and the south magnetic pole appear to be going into the same direction, and that the opposite place on the Earth from where they're headed towards is the South Atlantic anomaly?
So if Ryan wants to pull up the ESA map, we can look at that.
Okay. Is that not exactly right in terms of geography?
They're kind of converging, and it is interesting to think about how they are opposite polarity. So if they were to converge, then they should cancel out. So I wouldn't be surprised if that dynamic does exist. But yeah, I mean, so we can see, we have to be careful what we're talking about though, because the strong field region in Siberia is not the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere. That's the key.
Right.
Because that strong orange zone off to the right, scroll it now to the right, Ryan. That zone off to the right is not where the magnetic pole is. It's getting closer to that, but that's not where it is. Now, the magnetic pole in the southern hemisphere off the coast of Antarctica, it's right now moving effectively laterally along the coast of Antarctica at about 10 kilometers per year.
Yeah.
So its vector off the coast is only very slightly angled northward. It's mostly going to the west. It's not going vertically up. It did this big jog off the continent of Antarctica to that skew axis. Again, now the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere is almost exactly on the North Pole, whereas it used to be the opposite. In the South Pole, the magnetic pole in the southern hemisphere used to be almost exactly on the South Pole. Now this skewed the other way, but now the magnetic pole in the southern hemisphere off the coast of Antarctica is moving mostly laterally to the west. So it's not necessarily moving perfectly north where, yeah, if you do look at it is interesting though. If you look at that, if you were to take them and pinch them together, they would converge like right over, if they're moving at the same rate at the same time as well, they would converge over, yeah, they would converge over like let's say just India, right? But we see that it's not moving really northward now, right? We see how it's moving more along the coast of Antarctica.
So you think it's just normal movement of the poles towards these flux lobes potentially on the north, and it's just how the poles move, and we're just observing normal. There's nothing to worry about in terms of the poles.
Well, even if it was shooting straight up, that'd still be normal in a geologic sense, right? Because the Earth's like, yo, dude, I've done so many flips. You want to see me flip? I'll do a flip right now, right? So, but in terms of our consequences here on Earth, we would need to see that magnetic pole in the southern hemisphere to really change direction to go directly northwards
And fast, right?
and fast. And we would need, and it's been slowing down for the past 150 years. The velocity was higher for the magnetic pole in the southern hemisphere over the past 150 years than it is now. Now it's only about 10 kilometers per second. And the velocity of the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere, right, that's been reducing from about 60 kilometers per second to 40 kilometers per second. So it's deaccelerating. Though it was moving fast, but as we showed in the 200 AD to now graphic, that has gone through similar periods of high velocity in a circular pattern around the Arctic.
Is that scientifically agreed upon and accepted by everybody? Because I thought I fact checked that after a few episodes ago when I was talking about pole shifts with another guest, and what I had looked up, and Ryan, maybe you can ask ChatGPT this: if the north and south magnetic pole, specifically the north magnetic pole, was relatively stable for the last 2,000 years prior to 1859, because I thought I checked that and it told me that it really wasn't moving very much at all from between like 0 and 1859, and it was really closer to the last 150 years that it started to move. But is that article that you pulled up, is that like general scientific consensus, or is it just a theory? How sure are we about what the North Magnetic Pole was doing for the last 2,000 years?
One of the main ways of getting information on the magnetic field is that you will take a sediment core from a lake. This is how most of our data on excursions is gathered, actually, because we have a few different ways. You can look at lava flows that have cooled and look at that remnant magnetization. And a lot of that data for certain excursions only comes from like one or two locations. So I'm like, until we get like a bunch of locations around the world like Le Champ, I'm not going to put too many eggs into that excursion being a big deal. Maybe it is, but we can't go all in on it because we have two lava flow records from two spots nearby each other. So it's really limited. But that's one way to look at it. Another way to reconstruct the magnetic field is with archaeointensity data. So pottery sherds, that only goes back so far, right? The first pottery was made in Japan like 10,000 years ago. That's the oldest by far. I'm not sure if they've examined that.
There's older now.
Oh,
yeah,
great.
Yeah.
So maybe we can start to expand our...
There's actually stone vessels in place that were found at Karahan Tepe from like 12,000 years ago. It's crazy. But
it needs to be pottery.
I know. Pottery goes back before that too. Like even the pre-pottery Neolithic period, there's actually pottery discovered from like 14,000 years ago.
Like fired in a kiln?
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah,
so then we could, if they're willing to take some of those sherds and analyze them, we could get archaeointensity data as far back as that goes. Because the moment you fire in a kiln, it undergoes that basically the Curie point, and you lose the magnetization of wherever the grains are, and then it'll re-solidify and align to the magnetic field. So that's our other way of getting good, high quality data on Earth's magnetic field for various locations. But it's based off of human activity. Then the third way is with these sediments at lakes, because you always have sedimentation, and that's in general, the easiest way to get it, because the sedimentation is pretty regular, and if it's not, you can see those like periods of rapid deposition, and then you can take that and you can reconstruct the magnetic field, and there's lakes all around the world, and so it's a good way to get that data. And so that data for 200 to 1800 AD, or basically, yeah, 200 up to when we had our normal ability to measure it, which is higher quality, was based off of those sediments with these high Arctic lakes. So I can't think of anything that'd be better than that. Because again, the magnetic field behaves a little differently in the northern hemisphere in the high Arctic than it does at lower latitudes. So you could have lava flows in Hawaii, but it's gonna be a super low resolution understanding of what was happening with the magnetic pole in the high Arctic and northern hemisphere. If you want to understand that very specific movement, you need records right nearby, and that's what they did in that like 2013 study or something. And so I don't get any. I also utilize intuition, and I personally don't get any like oh, this seems a little weird or contrived or fabricated. It's like, it just seems to me that some good, honest, hardworking geoscientists did some good, honest work. That's what I get the sense. And it would put what's happening now into context. Ideally, we would have like 50,000 years of that data. So because even 1,800 years isn't that much, but we do see it kind of circling around with that one in-depth analysis that pulled from multiple groups as well for that time period. But if we put into context of humanity and kind of zoom back to the larger environment, we see these radioisotope levels go up, but we don't know what the sun was doing, what was the earth doing, what was our cosmic environment. So it's kind of a guessing game as to, okay, was Earth's magnetic field weaker, or maybe the sun was weaker, and therefore the heliosphere was letting more things in, and Earth's magnetic field is actually stronger, but than we think it is, but because the heliosphere is weaker, we're just naturally being bombarded with more. So it's this multi-body problem, and you won't fully be able to resolve it, and you kind of have to make educated guesses. That's the big thing. But there is quite a bit of evidence of us having lived through. I mean, we know that we lived through the Champ excursion, and that these excursions are important from a humanistic perspective, because, for example, we see the caves in Turkey, and there's a variety of other caves that have been important across time in humanity.
Darren Kuyu and Darren Kuyu in Turkey, and all the underground in Egypt. There's all kinds of underground structures and
the catacombs. And so I know that Robert Schoch has this solar hypothesis of a really strong solar impact coming in, and that's why the caves exist. But my kind of issue with that is it's too fast and too sudden. If there was like some super flare, it's super random. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. And so to have made this super elaborate cave system that's existed for thousands of years, and to have to live there out of this idea of there being a super flare that goes off and 15 hours later it hits, just seems to not make sense. And then that effect would hit, and then it'd be over effectively. I mean, there's going to be if it's a really big super flare or something, there's going to, I guess, be some downstream effects that would take years, but it's kind of like a sucker punch. But if you have an excursion where the field is weak for 100 years, it's 5% the strength, and you're getting tons of cosmic flux coming in, you can feel that. You're going to be outside, and you're going to be like, wow, I can we can feel changes in radiation during solar maximum and solar minimum. Like, some people feel like, wow, the sun's really strong today. You go from Canada down to Puerto Vallarta for vacation, and you're going to get burned pretty quick because you're receiving more sun. The other thing that seems to line up with these excursions, there's evidence that Earth undergoes these excursions when the sun is doing a lot of grand solar minimums. So this is kind of where it gets interesting, because the sun will cool off in activity. And when the sun is less active, there's no sunspots. So you have less X-ray flux, less extreme ultraviolet light. That seems to be like when the Earth's like, you good? You cool? I'm good to flip now? Okay, I'm going to flip. And then it does it. But most of the radiation for the sun is contained in ultraviolet and invisible light and an infrared light. So that's not really going to change much during a grand solar minimum, we think. But the higher frequency stuff will go away. The higher frequency stuff charges up the ionosphere, which drives those ionospheric currents, which alters Earth's magnetic field in that boundary zone and going further out. So if Earth is undergoing an excursion and the dipole strength weakens significantly, and the sun is in a grand solar minimum for a long duration, or a sequence of them for a long duration, ultraviolet light is still going to be high. You're still getting that sunburn. So you'd be walking around, let's say you're like a caveman, right? You're going to be walking around. It's going to hurt to be outside, right? You will be able to feel that radiation hitting you. I would imagine so. And over time, if a society like this is, again, like 100 years, now you have enough time to build those tunnel networks and have like a remembrance of that, such that hopefully people in the future, through oral tradition or whatever, are like, okay, it's time to jump back in the tunnels because it's happening again. And we build them out successively with every single flip. And with modern Homo sapiens having been around for hundreds of thousands of years, we've gone through a few of these. So maybe this has been developed across time. That makes a lot more sense to me than some mega solar storm hypothesis. And we build all these things out, but we have no way of knowing when that's going to occur. And usually the mega solar storms and then conversely, it seems that usually Earth's magnetic field is strongest when the sun is really active. So the two seem to pair together, and the Earth is like, I'm going to put my shields up when Big Bro over there is freaking out, right? So that's it. And so the two are resonating. The best evidence is that the two are resonating together like that, and that's probably in fact a response in some degree to the interstellar environment. Because there's also this idea of the sun being fed by interstellar and galactic Birkeland currents. Like all the stars are kind of nodes within this larger energy matrix. And if there's changes to that current flow to the sun, then that could maybe control or at least kind of guide its overall level of activity. Like we don't really know what the sun is. We just see this shell of plasma around it, but with like beyond that shell of plasma, it's kind of an unknown.
What probability do you assign to that, to the best theory that nuclear fusion is happening at the center of the sun? Like, obviously strong possibility, but everybody, that's another one kind of like the Big Bang that everybody's taken to fact. And is that really what's happening? I mean, I think I've heard you comment in the past, like, we don't really know what the sun is. And so, hence my question.
I don't know. I'm like 50%.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe I could see the sun being something totally different that defies I could really see the sun being this outer shell of plasma, but the inside is actually perhaps much cooler than we think and more structured and condensed, but I don't know. But if we have the energy coming in from like this interstellar current system, and it's these what we call Birkeland currents, but they're going to be more complex than that. But just like an energy matrix, because we see this reflected. That's the thing. So Hans Alfvén, because he's kind of been like one of the topics of this larger conversation. What was so great about his work and everyone else that was in his kind of field and people nowadays too, is we have these laboratory experiments. We have our in situ measurements of Earth's magnetosphere, also the ionosphere of Venus, and now interplanetary space and Voyager 1 and 2 just outside the heliosphere. We have all that data. We can also look at the macrostructures of the universe. So we see that the galaxies clump together into this web-like pattern. And so at the macro scale, we see a differentiation and matter condenses and those void spaces that are created. We see that like literally within us at the cellular level. We see that reflected within our own interplanetary scale. So it makes sense that that also exists in these intermediate zones, which are kind of hard to resolve because we're kind of smack dab in the middle of them. So if there's changes to the energy flow along these interstellar currents, then the sun could change in response to that. Maybe that's what guides solar minimums, because it just simply doesn't have the plasma to do these big outbursts. And then if it's being fed with a lot of plasma from these current systems, then maybe that's what creates a grand solar maximum like we're in right now. And there's rhythms to that. But, and again, they base the evidence of excursions mostly off of radioisotope data and also the remnant magnetization, but kind of the radioisotope data too, which means that there was more cosmic flux coming in. But it's hard to say, was Earth's field weak? Was the sun in a grand solar minimum? Was the cosmic environment really highly enhanced? It's difficult to put together. It's the same with Miyake events. It's like, are they solar in origin? Are they cosmic in origin? If you read the papers, they're like, we think it's solar, makes the most sense, but we can't conclusively say if it's solar and or cosmic. Or I even think it's like, why not from the Earth itself? Like, there's probably mechanisms that exist here on Earth that the Earth could do a big discharge of energy. Sometimes we see that with our own electrical systems. They just do their own discharge. And I had my own experience once. I was laying down, I was about to go to sleep, and I have no idea, like, don't ask me how this works, the physics, whatever, but I'm literally laying there and I had a massive electrical zap occur like above my chest and it discharged out. It was the craziest thing. I'm just laying there going to sleep. And it's not like I felt weird or anything before this, but all of a sudden there's just this big like zap and just like this boom electric discharge came off of my body. And it wasn't here. It was in my biofield, like a foot off of me, and just poof. But there's some energy that was there that just finally flung off. Like, these things exist.
You saw it, you heard it, like what?
Felt it and heard it.
Felt it and heard it.
Yeah, I mean, my eyes are closed because I was trying to go to sleep, and it just all of a sudden it's just like, whoa, what was that? And I mean, I've had a lot of interesting bioelectrical experiences that I could speak to, but that's just like one obvious example. Like, there's energy within the Earth, and who's to say that sometimes it's what's being released, and it's not necessarily external coming in, it's more internal going out. I think all of these could be explanations for Miyake events. We just see the radioisotopes bumping up, but we don't know if it's from the sun, from some cosmic gamma ray burst hitting us, or maybe the Earth does some crazy discharge that we just misidentified as something external. There's just a lot of ways to think about these things. Yeah. And there seems to be a relationship between all of them. And it's a larger symbiotic and synergistic network. And so that's why I think the universe is very simple, but I think like overly simple, like here is the truth, like Bible type stuff, right? I think it's just limiting. And we just don't know. But if the poles are flipping, let's say this century, then the radiation problem is going to be a big concern. Right. That's the big takeaway. Right. If we're concerned, if it's actually happening, let's say it is happening in the next 20 years or 50 years, it really accelerates somehow. Like it just happens. It's happening. Then it's like that radiation problem is going to be a big thing, because you step outside and you're going to be hit with like the same amount of UV radiation from the sun, but no protection from the Earth with the magnetic field, and the ionosphere is going to be weak because the ionosphere is absorbing a lot of that radiation, right? But if that's basically decharged, you're going to be getting even more ultraviolet light radiation than normal. And then you add in all this cosmic flux, which is super high frequency, like Now you're having mutations and everything, and that could explain these die-offs that we see with excursions. But some animals seem unaffected. Here's the other thing with that New Zealand study, and the Neanderthal extinction also, and this, the Lachamp excursion coincided with megafauna extinctions in like Australia. A big animal is not going to have, it's not going to be able to get in. A woolly mammoth can't get into a cave. Something that's smaller can find shelter, but if you're a big honking megafauna, you're just going to be just like,
Right.
getting hit by radiation,
Right.
and that's going to negatively affect you.
Interesting. Yeah. So the in terms of the power grids, like that's kind of I think a concern for a lot of people, or at least it's something that we ought to take into consideration as to like, because I think we can survive a lot of stuff. We can survive solar radiation for a long period of time as a civilization, but if we lose power, then that's going to be a problem from a civilization continuity standpoint.
An overnight perspective.
Overnight, civilization is basically gone. So, and the two things that are going to, kind of weigh on that or impact that, or it would be the magnetic field and and a solar storm. And so a weaker magnetic field, if it was extraordinarily weak, then you wouldn't even need that strong of a solar storm to kind of take out the Earth's power grids, but like, what is kind of like the...
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
But we'll chat about it.
So like you would need, I mean, not as strong from like a historical standpoint, from like so 1859, the Carrington event, I mean, if that were to hit and the fields were like super weak, what could that do? Like, is there some combination of those two things with the magnetic field and with a solar storm that would make you nervous as it relates to the power grids?
Well, it's kind of paradoxical. And since we haven't lived through this can't be said with any like conclusive nature. But as it relates to the effects of a solar storm hitting the Earth, you have to keep a couple things in mind. The big thing that we're worried about are these geomagnetically induced currents, which, put simple, is that you have this solar storm hit the Earth and it really charges up the ionosphere. This is, again, where a very important component of this whole equation. The magnetic field there and these electric currents are generated. Electric current generates a magnetic field, and magnetic field generates electric currents. It just kind of reciprocally goes all the way down and up. So if you have this Carrington event hit the Earth, it's going to generate these very strong electric currents in the ionosphere, which creates these really big field swings. The majority of the magnetic field swings during a geomagnetic storm are generated in the ionosphere. It's not fluctuations out the magnetopause, like 5 or 10 Earth radii out. It's most of those field fluctuations are from electric currents pulsing 1,000 kilometers up or less. The magnetic field, though, is able to get down to the surface because after the ionosphere, the atmosphere is pretty resistive, so it's not being absorbed. So those field swings can then effectively reach the surface. They also reach upwards too, but they reach the surface with very little attenuation. Then they hit the crust and anything that's conductive. And so a lot of them will just penetrate down through the crust and keep going down, slowly absorb into the crust, into the mantle. But if you have something that's very conductive, now it absorbs all that energy and turns it into electric current. So it's a geomagnetically induced current, GIC. So we don't really have any natural things that form super strong geomagnetically induced currents other than maybe some igneous geologic structures, maybe enhanced over a sedimentary one, because the range of conductivity for rock types can vary quite a bit. The strongest geomagnetically induced currents are going to be in the ocean because it's very conductive, if we're talking about natural GICs. But the strongest nowadays are going to be our transmission lines, because you have copper or aluminum wires that are hundreds or thousands of miles or kilometers long. And you need that long line, unbroken, to be able to capture that magnetic field swing because it's a long period fluctuation. So the wavelength is long. But if you have a structure that's similar in wavelength, it can now resonate with that. And now you can get these voltage differences across the conductor because it's now host to a really strong GIC. That then can overload the power grid because the power grid operates with very precise measurements and voltages. And if all of a sudden you add 800 volts of potential to one side and the other side is different, it can cause a transformer or whatever blow out. And if it's a big enough storm, maybe this happens across multiple areas and the entire power system goes down for a city. And if it's really crazy, maybe for a country, but it'd have to be some absolutely epic and insane storm. Like we haven't had anything like that happen. But we also haven't had a Carrington event like with the modern systems we have now. The 1989 storm, the DST index went down to, it's a measure of like a storm, went down to negative 589 nanotesla, I believe it is. And the power grid for, I believe it's Quebec, went down in 1989. The storm that we had last year, which they call the Gannon storm, also known as the Mother's Day storm because it was May 10th to the 12th. The maximum drop we had was, I think they revised it to like negative 405 nanotesla, but the value that I know is negative 412 nanotesla. So let's just simplify it to negative 400 nanotesla for that DST index for the G5 storm last year, negative 589 for 1989. They estimate that the Carrington impact was like 800 to 1500, like negative 800 to negative 1500 nanotesla for the DST. So that's one way to measure that. So if we had a storm like that hit now, we don't know how strong these geomagnetically induced currents would be, but they'd be very, very strong. And that would undoubtedly knock out the power some places, but would it be a global power outage? Probably not. I actually don't think we probably need some sort of like super flare to hit us for that to be a concern. And again, we don't know if these Miyake events are from super flares. There's evidence from sun-like stars to do super flares, but here on Earth, we can't conclusively say that we've been hit by super flares. I personally think that the sun probably has done some crazy stuff. I think it has a whole range of expression, and it's probably just not that frequent. We get sometimes big events, but they're less frequent. But the thing is, the geomagnetically induced currents are dependent on the magnetic field because, again, it's a geomagnetic induced current. So if you have a weak field, you're not going to have a strong induced current because the field is weak. So if Earth's magnetic field is really weak, you're not going to get strong GICs. You'll get a ton of particle flux. That's different than a GIC. Now, can that cause local electrostatic charging? And can that cause problems? Sure. Will that be enough to knock out power grids and systems? I don't know. Like that may be a more widespread distributed problem where people's cell phones and laptops are frying because they're all charging up. But that's pretty easily solved if you ground something. But then, of course, the entire Earth is being awash in radiation. So who the heck knows what happens? But if the field is weak or weakening, whatever it is, the actual effect of a impact in some aspects is going to be less and less. You're not going to have as much aurora, like because these GICs are going to be weaker. Like it's just going to be more just pure particle flux coming down in. The term would be ground level enhancement. We see these, and so you're just going to have just more just radiation hitting the surface. But in terms of strong electric currents hitting transmission lines and causing them to blow out, we just don't know. But that's if the magnetic field is weaker, then you're not going to get as strong of an induced current because the magnetic field is weaker. So,
I mean, it's still it's still 85% of what it was in 1859 or 88% of what it was in 1859. So, I mean, it's in that ballpark. So, I mean, weaker, yeah, we would be talking 100 years from now or something, you know, in like, or 1,000 years from now or whatever. But I mean, at the levels that it is right now, if a 500 and something nanotesla score wiped out Quebec's power grid,
Yeah.
then certainly you would think a 1,500 nanotesla score ought to do some freaking damage, man.
It would be a wild ride.
Yeah.
It would be undoubtedly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be a wild ride. Yeah, and especially with power systems being old and failing, and also now, like, to return to AI, like these data centers are pulling so much power, and they haven't put in decentralized energy sources really yet for them. So I think in probably 20 years, we're going to have a much more decentralized power network based off of like small modular like reactors. That's the hope and the goal. Yeah, and some of the effects would be like like satellite and GPS disruption. That's a big one. So it's not just about power grid failures. We've seen how from some of these storms in the past year or two, issues with Starlink and issues with a variety of service providers, and a lot of them are like, people are like, oh, it's just coincidental that Verizon went down the exact time we had a G3 storm.
Right.
And it's like, well, you know, it's hey, you can believe what you want, but when we have like 3 different cell networks go down precisely when we have like a severe G4 storm,
the exact time.
the
I remember
exact
that.
time,
Yeah.
well, it's probably
Probably.
you know, looks like a duck, and you know the whole saying. So
Right.
yeah, it's something that we should be mindful of and prepared for. I mean, I personally, like, I'm happy that with one of my places I can call home, like we have a spring nearby you can walk to, fill up good water. I just drink it straight if you want. Good old Pennsylvania water. And then got the garden. And I got a good green thumb, and I just put in some solar panels recently. It's not much, but it's enough to heat up a griddle plate and keep a fridge going. So, like, worst case scenario, like, boom, like, it's good to go. I think that's a smart thing to be prepared with. I recently, when I was there last, about like 60 or 80 pounds of rice from Costco, which costs like less than $100, right? Because rice is, bought some beans and some dried vegetable, like dried bell peppers and vegetable mix. And
How long does that last? Not to eat, but to stay before it expires. Rice
is basically indefinite.
is it?
I mean, in the human time scale, if you keep it like sealed up and nice, boom, it's great. And then the freeze dried veggies are.
But that's the way to prepare. I mean, that's what we're talking about as like the way to prepare for a Carrington type event on the global power grids is to find a way to get water and find a way to get food. I mean, and we're not talking about preparing in terms of like securing the power grids and being okay and having them turn back on the next day, because that's not going to happen. You know, I mean, we're talking about like survival shit right now.
Yeah. I mean, so ideally we would have a whole bunch of transformers on hand, but as far as I'm aware, we did, and then we gave them all to Ukraine because of the war. So maybe we replenish that. But, you know, when these things go off, the people that go out there to repair it, God bless them, are hopefully going to do it pretty quick, because it's, you know, it's not like these, I mean, if it's strong enough, maybe a wire can melt, right? But these, in 1859, we had these telegraph stations, and these were like quite low sophistication systems compared to now. So I would think that our modern systems being hit with the Carrington event, most of the system probably be unaffected. It could take the surge of current without, let's say, melting or something like that. Though clearly kinks in the chain are going to break. Question is where, how many, how fast can we fix that? Do we have the tools and personnel on hand to do so? If we keep stockpiles of this stuff, I think we could probably overcome some of these issues pretty quickly. It also depends on, if we're talking about the extent of some issue, where is it going to hit? If it takes New York City offline, like that place is going immediately into anarchy.
Immediately.
Like,
Mass cannibalism.
It already is.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
no doubt. Yeah, it'd be crazy. Ryan, check if our power grids currently have backup generators, and if how ask that question. I'm almost positive the answer is no, that we don't have the equipment in place, and that it's made by like in Singapore by like one company that like
With the engineer who's 90 who's about to leave.
Right. Yeah, he's about to retire. He might have retired since the last time I looked this up, but I think we're completely screwed if this happens.
Yeah, we hope not. And I also do have hope and faith in the resiliency of people. And so we've talked about a lot of things, but if that could be a catalyst and that could help bring people back to a more normal like way of living that's interacting together, strong community, bartering, using real money instead of, this this worthless paper that we have.
Yeah.
That's just being inflated away.
After everybody eats each other, you mean?
They're hopefully not. But I wouldn't.
Once the 10% of the population that are cannibals survive with it, then they can create this new economic system.
Great.
No, I agree. I hear you though. I'm optimistic, and it's probably better long term.
I mean, did you get all the questions that you wanted answered about or my best thoughts on the magnetic field? Because it's all kind of combined together, and we really don't know like what's happening with it, but we do see the South Atlantic anomaly expanding. This is an area of weak field strength. It's like this reverse polarity flux lobe. In the past, we've seen places have a surge in the magnetic field strength. So I don't see the South Atlantic anomaly being like a 100% evidence of something critical happening with the magnetic field, though it could be. It's like a reverse polarity one this time. It could be a positive polarity one in 500 years. Maybe the field radically accelerates and flips like this century. But as of right now, it's changing, but not concerningly so. And it's still within normal, like a normal stable zone, you could call it. But again, the 1,000 days and then 1 day of crazy change means that maybe it can happen faster than we think. But it seems the evidence from Lachamp is that there's like a 100-year period or so where the dipole strength is about 5% what it normally is. And right now we do have the dipole field weakening and the quadrupole field strengthening a little bit. Their orders of magnitude different, but effectively the quadrupole field and the octupole fields are staying stable. The dipole field is the one that's falling off. So that is kind of the recipe. But there also is like this critical threshold that you have to pass. At least the geologic record suggests that. And we're still like 80% above that threshold. So it seems that we have quite a way to go before there'd be a chance for that the geodynamo to have an ability to flip. Because if you have all this inertia going this way to generate the field, that has to totally slow down for it to then reemerge on the other side.
So your just last question on this topic then, your odds of a flip occurring within the next, call it 40 years are what? And your odds of a flip occurring in the next 150 years are what?
I'd say next 40 years, I'd put like less than 1% on that.
Okay.
But I wouldn't put 0, of course.
Yeah.
But you'd have to like next 10 years, you have to see some really big changes, like really quick. And this increase in the South Atlantic anomaly is
it's a big freaking change.
It's a big change.
Yeah.
But that's why learning about the history of the positive field strength flux lobes is really important, because we saw them emerge over the Levantine. We saw them emerge over Western Europe. We've seen them hit Hawaii, Mesoamerica, Japan. They've all had these big increases at times, and they're transient at like that 2 to 3 to 500 year time frame. So the South Atlantic anomaly, that's been tracked since the first absolute magnetometer measurements were made. in the 1850s or so, like 1830, 1850 with Gauss. And there's some evidence from further back when we had relative magnetometer measurements. But it's really hazy because most of our relative magnetometer measurements or magnetic field measurements were conducted in the northern hemisphere because that's where a lot of the sea expeditions were, and very few from the southern hemisphere. So we have very low resolution there. But some models that were created from that data showed like a South Atlantic anomaly-like feature back in like the late 1700s. But if this is, and there's some evidence that this has been existing for like more than 1 million plus years. So there's also that.
Okay.
It's hard to resolve like what exactly that is.
Yeah. So
But it could just be a transient 500-year phenomenon that we're halfway through, and maybe right now it's actually the worst, and we're just going to start, that reverse polarity is going to start fading out and the normal field will strengthen again. We don't know.
yeah.
But it is growing and it's reducing in strength.
Right, right. And the flux lobe on the north, we've got the north magnetic pole rushing towards, but the South Atlantic anomaly, the south magnetic pole isn't rushing towards or away from that. It's not really interacting with the South Atlantic anomaly.
You could, if you're looking at the map, it is moving about 10 kilometers per year towards it.
Towards it. Oh, okay. Okay.
Because it's moving to the west.
Okay.
So it is, I guess that's interesting. It's moving about 10 kilometers per year towards it, but that's pretty slow.
Pretty slow right now.
Now, if it was going 50 or 60, now it's like, okay, it's really kicking up. But it's slowed down ever since it moved off the coast. So my intuition is telling me, and who knows what it actually is, but my intuition is kind of saying that the magnetic field probably always has a little bit of skew to it. And it's not perfect. Because the perfect geomagnetic pole, this is an idealized magnetic field, a perfect dipole field, where the north and the south, or whatever they are exactly opposite each other. That's different than the reality. The reality is that we have a skew in our field. Because the field isn't just the dipole. It's like 90 to 95% dipole, and that's also like 5 to 10% the higher orders, the quadrupole, the octopole,
Okay.
the decapole, I suppose, whatever they are.
Let's go to the last topic, maybe, which would be seismic activity and kind of like earthquakes and volcanoes and stuff. So you've done some awesome work on both of those things. Why don't you kind of maybe just paint the picture for what's happening from a seismic standpoint on the Earth right now?
Yeah. So it's probably all connected. How? It's kind of the big question. I think there's a big component to seismicity and earthquakes that's connected to electric currents in the Earth. But we don't have that much data on that because this is really happening at depth. But we know that the Earth gets more, it heats up the further down you go, and it therefore gets more conductive. So you're going to have really strong electric currents deeper within the planet. And if there is some sort of larger heating event that's taking place overall, then I'd imagine those electric currents are going to get stronger and stronger. And we're in this long period of solar activity right now, what they call the modern maximum, which I think has been pumping a lot of energy into the Earth now for like 300 years. Even going further back, we seem to be in a heightened period for like 1,500 years. So that's kind of the broader context. But this year in particular, 2025, has been very strong because of all the earthquake activity with Kamchatka. Because the way earthquake energy scales is if you go up in order of magnitude, it's 32 times more energy released. So the total seismic energy. So you can have, let's say, a lot of magnitude 7s in a year. And then the next year, you don't have any mag 7s, but you have one magnitude 8. Well, you would need 32 magnitude 7 quakes to equal that one magnitude 8. So our time record for earthquake activity is very limited. We know of some older quakes, and we've done now geologic forensics to find evidence of past slips. I mean, you can estimate the magnitude based off of the amount of slip, and that data goes back usually no more than 5,000 years, and it gets really low resolution. But in terms of modern seismic measurements, We have, I mean, basically like 100 years. And even then, the past 40 years have been game changer because of how many seismographs we deployed since like 1980. So now we have a much better record of the lower magnitude quakes. And we only capture them if we have networks in that area. So with a global network, you can capture magnitude 5 earthquakes, maybe down to magnitude 4.5 everywhere. But if you want to see earthquake activity in a very specific zone, you need a seismic network there. So there could be quakes happening way out in the Pacific, where if we don't have a seismic network of some density there, we're not going to pick up those quakes. So this occurred up in the Arctic with Gokul Ridge in the Gokul supervolcano system, where in 1999, we had the biggest ever earthquake swarm on a mid-ocean ridge. And they went there later and conducted bathymetric surveys and ROV surveys, and they found 3 new volcanoes that were created because those earthquakes were connected with a volcanic underwater event. And it was so powerful, it actually created pyroclastic glass under the water. Think about the amount of pressure that existed. So, and the magma down there is very, very unique to create these sort of dynamics, and it was quite incredible. But they wanted to better understand that. So then they deployed a network all around in the islands like Svalbard and Nova Zemlya and some of these other islands in the high Arctic. And then we started to pick up these lower magnitude earthquakes and those rhythms and trends in that zone. So in terms of understanding seismic activity, the networks are really important, how long they've been operating. So it's really difficult to say what the kind of trends are across time because on the geologic sense, our record is just a blink of an eye. But what I've been doing recently is I've just been examining the earthquake activity, and I have my knowledge of space weather, and that seems to influence earthquake activity due to how energy is being loaded into the planet. There's certain features on the sun called coronal holes that seem to influence earthquake activity through mechanisms we don't completely understand. But there is research on this, and there's correlations. And my thoughts, like, how do you kind of become more causative than the sun, right? Because there's this whole correlation does not equal causation thing, which people just kind of like behaviorally repeat when someone brings up something interesting. And it's often true, but you have to also examine what the agent that's correlated with is. We're not looking at Domino pizza deliveries for the seismic stuff. We're looking at the sun. It's correlated with the sun. It's probably something to that because it's like the thing that's driving everything in our solar system. So we've been looking at the space weather conditions. I read the research on how it's connected to some earthquakes and specifically high magnitude earthquakes. We've been seeing all these conditions kind of line up. Saw a lot of foreshock activity in Kamchatka starting in July. We had a magnitude 7.4 that hit, and then the earthquakes kept going. And it was like, guys, this is kind of weird. And we had already been overdue for a megaquake, overdue for like 4 years. Because typically we get one per year, which is a magnitude 8 or greater. If we want to use that as the definition of a megaquake, magnitude 8 or greater. Usually we get one per year. We didn't have one before July, going all the way back to August of 2021. I think it was South Sandwich Islands in August of 2021, something like that, 8.2, 8.1. So it's like, guys, it's been 4 years. This is kind of odd. So we probably should have one coming up just statistically. And I kind of just had a feeling in a sense. Again, I use intuition a lot. So I started making some videos just discussing megaquakes, what they are, and like how often they occur a few months before we had that big magnitude 8.8. Then we had that 7.4 earthquake in Kamchatka, and we then had a whole bunch of other like magnitude 6s and stuff and 5s that kept going, and it didn't seem to be resolving. It seemed like a foreshock sequence. So then I released a video 3 days before the megaquake where, I think it was a live stream, where the first part of the live stream was identifying zones of highest seismic risk at this moment in time. There's like 3 places or 4 places I looked at, and the first zone I zoned in on like 7 minutes into the live stream, was Kamchatka. And I laid out exactly what I just mentioned to you about how we haven't had a mega quake and how this area historically can have big earthquakes because of the subduction zone, how this activity looks like foreshock activity. And then on July 29th, I think it was like 23:24 UTC, Universal Time, we had the big magnitude 8.8 megaquake. But what was interesting about that, it was pretty cool to be able to get that pretty bang on. Because I said specifically that we could be looking at a magnitude 8.5 or greater. I didn't say it's going to happen this day and it's 100% guaranteed, but I was basically laying out probabilities. And I was like, I think it's a kind of a high percentage chance that we have a magnitude 8.5 or greater in the near future here. So that's what a proper forecast should be, at least I would think, where you're not, you're giving percentages for people to weigh themselves based off of your expertise. But there's been this interesting resonance back and forth with Kamchatka and the Drake Passage, because we had a magnitude 7.3 in May, Drake Passage. Then we had the sequence here, Kamchatka. And then in August, we had a 7.4 in Drake Passage, which is south of South America. And then we had a that was a 7.4 there. That was in August. Then in September, we had finally the aftershock for that magnitude 8.8, because we also didn't have a big magnitude 7 aftershock. The highest it got to is like 6.9. So it's like, well, an 8.8 earthquake should give us an aftershock 1 magnitude less. So that's now a new target that we can forecast because we haven't had it. Guys, we should probably have an aftershock like that sometime in the next few months. It then happened. So there, one earthquake forecast then set off all the others effectively. It's just following the logic trail out. And it all started with the conditions of A, we're overdue for a megaquake based off statistics, and B, the space weather conditions. It's really that simple. So then we had the 7.8 or 7, I think it's 7.8 aftershock, maybe a 7.9 in September. I believe it's the 22nd September, Kamchatka. So at this point, we had the megaquake. Well, at this point, we have an earthquake in the Drake Passage, magnitude 7 plus, is 7.3. Then we have Kamchatka. Then we have Drake Passage. Then we have Kamchatka. It's like, well, it looks like a pattern here. Again, just following the patterns. Guys, I think we probably have a big earthquake coming to Drake Passage again. And I don't know what the magnitude is, but it's likely stronger than the last ones, because if you look at the total seismic energy release, there's an imbalance between them. There's a lot more energy released with Kamchatka, a lot less release with Drake Passage, but they're in resonance and they're antipodal. So they're on almost exact opposite sides of the Earth, which is the other layer that adds a little bit of like, okay, what is this? And it's not just totally, there's like a connection there, right? Almost exact opposite sides of the Earth. Something's up. And they both have volcanic arcs, like right there. So then, well, we just had a 7.5 hit the Drake Passage in almost the exact same spot as the other ones. And that's actually an area that typically doesn't get big earthquakes. Normally they're along the volcanic arc, but this is like isolated to this one zone. It's like on this old fault system or something. So that's really how so then I, forecast that one accurately. Again, I did not give an exact time or an exact magnitude, but in terms of just global trends, been doing some pretty cool stuff there. So that's exciting, because if we can do it at that low resolution, then with time, we should be able to start improving our forecasting ability to a greater degree, especially if we incorporate like a lot of good data sources. I think the ultimate like machine, you could say, is the human, right? I think the ultimate quantum computer is right here. So I don't discount any particular person over like a machine. Like I always think that the person will probably win out, just at least as of right now. But with all those data feeds coming in, I think that because we can also connect into like more astral realms and other dimensions. Like there's a whole bunch of machinery within us that goes far beyond like the material realm. So undoubtedly, I was doing something there and just entering into resonance with like a larger consciousness field. And we can even talk about how, like, does time even exist, right? Is all the information already there accessible, past, present, future? Like, what's deja vu? Like, you're experiencing the future right now. Like, right, it gets wild. But at some point, I think that we can better really create accurate forecasting methods. And sometimes we get earthquake precursor signals, and we've used that on the channel before to not 100% accurately. There's been a few false alarms, maybe more like a couple false alarms, but there's been a lot more wins and losses in terms of like, guys, we just saw a really weird energy burst in the Schumann resonances. We may have a big earthquake coming up, and then like 3 days later, 2 days later, we do. So it's just, I think my success there has just been because I'm multidisciplinary and looking at a bunch of different things. And so I bring it all together, and I've done a pretty good job at not letting myself just follow rote programming. And also I just listen to my intuition and guidance. But the earthquake activity has been very notable for 2025. And I think it also may be notable as it relates to volcanic activity, because we often see really big earthquakes near big volcanoes before big events. And Kamchatka right now is like boiling.
Is it? So yeah, would that be the one on the planet right now that is potentially the most dangerous?
Yeah, if I had a point, if you had like, you can choose one spot.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of locations. I mean, Campi Flegrei, though, is also in Italy. Its seismic activity has been going parabolic in the past 4 years. So that's also like, this thing looks like it's ready to like pop.
Yeah.
And that's a big volcanic system. It hasn't had an eruption in a while. So it'd be a toss-up between Campi Flegrei and some volcano on the Kamchatka Peninsula.
Well, what kind of an impact would that have on the Earth in total? Is that local impacts and effects, or is that like nuclear winter kind of global?
I don't know why I laugh anytime these apocalypse scenarios get brought up.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be laughing if it happened.
You're right.
Let's just say that.
Right. Well, you're laughing because you've got your spring water and you got your rice. You're good to go.
I'm so solid. Live off beans and rice.
Totally.
Get so adapted.
Yeah. But are any of the areas of volcanic activity right now big enough to impact anything on a global scale?
Yeah, both those zones.
Are they?
I mean, there's other volcanoes too, of course. There's tons of spots.
Yeah.
But the deeper foundational factor is that there's some thermal heating and expansionary effect of the Earth. I'd expect there to be multiple things that kind of all coincide on a geologic time scale. So it may not be like the same week it all happens, but maybe over a 50-year time period, people are going to look back and be like, wow, there was a lot of activity that happened from this year to that year. And there seems to be that effect in play. And some of these effects are delayed too. So with this grand solar maximum that we're in now for 300 years, but even some of these other periods, like the medieval maximum, I think it takes time for this to kind of like work through the Earth. And so we've been loaded for 300 years, then it may finally be starting to express itself. But we've had big eruptions in the past 150 years, but we would need like a VEI 6 eruption to probably trigger something really significant. Campi Flegrei could do that. And for Kamchatka, you would need to take one of these stratovolcanoes and turn it into a caldera. Like literally an entire mountain just explodes into a caldera. Like that's how big it would have to be, because you need enough material to get blasted up to the stratosphere and even perhaps even higher up. And there's really, I don't think there'd be much warning for that. You could, let's say it happened 2 weeks from now, the warning could be right now. Like we could be in that warning period. It's hard to say. But if I'm looking at this objectively, I would say there's a heightened risk of that happening in the near future for Kamchatka and also Campi Flegrei, because that's really a spot that seems to really be picking up with activity. But Campi Flegrei also goes through rhythms. And we also have to, like, let's step back. Our seismic networks are new. So we don't have 500 years of seismic data for Campi Flegrei. We know the volcanic eruption history, but maybe it's gone through these sort of increases in earthquakes and and gas emissions and uplift in such a way that it looks like it's about to erupt, but it's actually just part of a normal secular variation on like a 100-year time scale. We could be in that, and we just don't know because we don't have 100 years back. So that's why it's really hard to say. But with the megaquake off the coast of Kamchatka, we had increased volcanic activity preemptive to that megaquake from some of the volcanoes there. Then the two coincided perfectly where I think it was Kluchevskoy volcano reached its peak in thermal output, which they measure from space with like mid-infrared satellites. That coincided perfectly with the megaquake. So the two are clearly linked. And then we had Krashenikov volcano, which hadn't been active for 600 years, start erupting right afterwards, effectively. And it's been continuing to erupt and having effusive activity and everything since then. And other volcanoes have started to come online. So that area just looks really dynamic right now. I don't know what the heck's happening there, but it is close to where that magnetic field is moving. I think all these things are connected together, but we don't precisely know how. It is pretty far out, but it's not like, Kamchatka is a lot closer to that Siberian flux lobe than Hawaii, right? So there's it just in terms of that connection, they're closer together. But is that linked? I don't know. I just see the entire Earth as a really interconnected, fascinating system that's conscious and interacting with the sun and interstellar space in ways beyond our current understanding, but also like readily giving us a lot of hints and clues as to what the deal is. And it's asking us to like investigate it and better understand it.
For sure.
That's what I see.
Yep. Love it. Well, you got to let us know if anything is coming from a, from a solar storm standpoint, from a volcanic seismic standpoint. So at least give me a heads up so I can, get somewhere safe, because Florida's probably not the best place to be for.
Yeah, you got that well water.
We got the well
that'd
water.
Be difficult to drink.
It's pretty rough. It's pretty rough. Yeah. Although a lot of Floridians grew up drinking that stuff from my generation, and everybody's basically still alive. So,
it's kind of sulfury. So it should be good for you to some degree.
Yeah.
Not too much.
Yeah.
In Iceland, they use the hot sulfur water to. Have you been to Iceland?
No, not yet. No.
Yeah, you'll like it. I hope so. Mm-hmm. They use the hot sulfur water to shower with, so it really stinks, but your skin's amazing afterwards. And then they tap straight into like the cold water aquifers. It's the best, like some of the best water on Earth. It's been filtered through the volcanic rock for eons, and it's just a straight metal pipe that they put straight down. And they don't have like one citywide system. It's very localized. So like one block will have it and then spread out just for the block. So
we're in a grand solar maximum, but we're also within the solar peak of the grand solar maximum, like the solar cycle, which lasts like 22 years or 11 years or something like that, right? And
12 years.
12 years, yeah. So does that do you think that that's a coincidence that 3i Atlas is flying by at the peak, at one of the peaks during a peak? I mean, there's so many coincidences happening with that thing right now.
Yeah, that's what I find really interesting.
Yeah.
And if we know it has this large coma. So my biggest question with 3i Atlas, going beyond everything we said at the beginning, is just like, during its perihelion, is it going to, which is effectively happening when this video releases. I mean, we're just a few days off from it when this drops. Is that being really ionized to a greater degree, and how is that going to affect it, and how does that interact with the larger like electrodynamic circuit of the solar system? I think if we wanted to kind of stay in normal grounded reality and physics, that's the main question that we should be asking, because it's not solar minimum. Here's the thing. During 2017 with the Oumuamua, and this is, chalk up to coincidence. It's just, you can't deny the facts of this. Perihelion for Oumuamua, and it got really close within the orbit of Mercury, but it was much smaller and did not have a coma that we detected.
Within the orbit of Mercury? I forgot about that.
Zoomed in really close, but it was quite a bit smaller than 3i Atlas.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
its perihelion, September 9th, 2017. On the 4th and on the 10th of September, we had the strongest solar flares of solar cycle 24, which was a weak solar cycle. And we were nearly at the end of it because this is 2017. The maximum period for solar cycle 24, it was, see, inside the orbit of Mercury. The peak for solar cycle 24 was basically 2012 to 2014. Maybe you could say 2011 to 2014, but that's the zone. We were nearly at solar minimum when all of a sudden we had a pretty big increase in sunspots that month. Ryan could go to the Space Weather Prediction Center by NOAA and click on the, I could guide him too, but yeah, he could go there and we'll see this increase in the sunspots products and data. And we're in a solar flare right now. G2 storm coming in, supposedly. And then go down to solar cycle progression, just slightly to the left, up, right? Solar cycle, boom, boom. And we'll have 2017 is there. If you go over to September 2017, you keep it right where it is. No. Keep it right where it is. Move it just a little bit. Yeah, see that spike right there? That's the perihelion of Oumuamua. And so it's not a big increase in sunspots, but it was getting basically near minimum. We see it basically doubled. We had the two biggest solar flares on the 4th and the 10th of September, right on both sides of the perihelion. And we had the biggest earthquake of 2017 on September 8th at magnitude 8.2 in Mexico.
Wow.
So kind of crazy how all that combined at the same time.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I mean, that's a n equals 1. But it's definitely one worth considering. Then now the second interstellar object was Borisov. It happened 2019. If you look at the sunspots, now that we pulled it up, you see 2019 sunspots are basically 0. So the sun was not active. So it's unlikely that Borisov is going to trigger or something is going to trigger activity when the sun is completely at solar minimum.
But how many solar units was Borisov away from the sun?
It got pretty close too, but I don't know within what orbit it cut within.
Okay.
Probably within Venus, but I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
Ryan could pull it up if he so chose. It's Borisov.
Okay.
2I Borisov.
But it was a smaller one as well, right?
Yeah, and it happened during. Actually, it looks like it cut only to Mars.
Okay.
So that also then that makes it less likely to interact. You know, the close, outside of Mars. So the closer they get, the more, it seems to me, the more likely it interacts with the sun. Because you're getting this large electromagnetic influence really close, and you get an electric circuit that all of a sudden gets energized. And if you research into plasma and double layers, when you have a strong electric charge, a current passing through a double layer, which is a steep electric gradient. So it'll be a high potential, low potential, and it's really steep, whereas normally it's kind of slow and steady. Double layer is really steep. When you get an electric current that's stronger to pass through that, it can be explosive. So we see with some solar flares is that there'll be a big flare, and then it'll like flare again and again and again and again from the same spot. We saw that recently last year and also this year with certain solar flares. That's basically that double layer continuously being injected with energy and exploding, and then having those solar flares as a result. So when these things get really close, that seems to affect solar activity. Now, 3I Atlas is cutting within the orbit of Mars.
Close to Venus, right?
Getting pretty close to Venus.
Yeah. Within the orbit of Earth, I thought, too, but...
No, because its closest is about 1.36 astronomical units.
Oh,
so
okay.
then if it relates to influencing solar activity, then the bigger question is, well, how big is the thing? Because Oumuamua got close, but it was tiny. It was less than a kilometer. But if 3I Atlas is 50 kilometers across, and we know it has this big coma, well, maybe it's close enough because of its size to still influence activity. We don't know. That's my base case. I could be wrong. We'll see. But we're already seeing solar activity pop up right now. We're in a radiation storm as we speak. I think it just ended. Or that's the 24 hours. So we had the strongest solar flare in a few days today, like a M something. Ryan would have to go to prox and data and then X-ray flux. But we should go to the middle of the screen. It's go as X-ray flux. Boom, shakalaka. Yeah, so you see right there, we had just on the right, just recently, 2 strong flares and a lot of activity just in the past 3 days. But it hasn't been exceptional. We'll see if we get something crazy. But the Muamua story is interesting. 3 Atlas looks more dynamic than that. But hopefully in like 20 years' time, or maybe not hopefully, we have a longer list and record so we can really understand this. But we have other comets that fly, actual comets that have flown by that seem to provoke solar activity. So that's also something. All the systems are connected, but they're different each time. Like sometimes you see an earthquake pop off right during a strong geomagnetic storm or like immediately afterwards. Other times it's like some other factor. So that's why I think an AI system may struggle with it because it's going to be a little too linear, and the Earth is not linear. Most of these things we were talking about are not linear. They're all chaotic and messy, just like we are as humans, and more so. And so I think I think it's kind of going to require someone to kind of dip into their eccentric genius a little bit to track this stuff and devote themselves towards it and make some mistakes and hopefully make a lot more good calls and bad calls. And the key is establishing the track record and being clear at that track record, because there's a lot of people that say things and like, I've made this, I made that, I made that, but then you go try to find the receipts and like, where are the receipts? And if there's no receipts, it's like, well, I don't think you probably did the thing, because if you did, you would publish the receipts, because that's important, because otherwise people aren't going to take you seriously. Yeah. So that's kind of my thought process and philosophy. But I hope more people start really doing this and doing it qualitatively, because I'm seeing a lot of people now utilize AI tools and then thinking that they're becoming experts in 3 months. And I certainly kind of just sprung up, but I've been now like every single day, like this is my deal for the majority of the day, going back to when I quit my job in 2021. But I was also in this field beforehand since I graduated college, and I also went to school for geology. So, and I've been actually doing this for quite a while in that context. But I don't think you can become an expert in something in 3 months because an AI gave you an answer that you wanted to hear. So people need to do the real work and use these tools intelligently. Like, example would be using Notebook LM to like create a podcast with good material, but just asking for it to confirm your idea when these things they want to cozy up to you. I don't know. I'm not really into that. And I see that a lot. I talked to Grok once and immediately started love bombing me. Like within 2 messages, I was like, this is weird.
Yeah. Yeah. AI today is not like AI is going to be in 5 years or 10 years. Once AGI comes on, it's really going to be completely a different experience. But, well, yeah, that is awesome, man. That is a phenomenal perspective and very educational and very much appreciated chatting with you as I always do. I always learn a lot chatting with you, and it always makes me feel a little bit better. I'm less ready to go supply the bunker and make sure that I have enough bullets. And I always step back from the ledge a little bit after chatting with you. So I very much appreciate that and appreciate your perspective. And any closing thoughts? I mean, before you tell people where they can follow you and whatnot.
The bigger energy in the background right now, because we didn't touch at all on planetary resonances or alignments for the most part, but the big thing that's occurring right now is we have this conjunction between Saturn and Neptune. So the two are aligning up in the sky, and Saturn is structure and stability and the 3D material realm, and Neptune is the liminal realm. It's just expansive and everywhere. It's the collective consciousness. It's the oceans. It's interstellar space. It's all possibility, where Saturn is like one possibility. And we see with these conjunctions across time is that boundaries and structures dissolve and new ones form. So that conjunction nearly occurred this July. And it's connected to all these things that we've been talking about for this year. Because we were nearly exact with that conjunction when we had that megaquake, which is interesting. Maybe that's just an overlap, but it could be connected. We have the conjunction go exact the end of February of 2026. And in fact, we have a really big alignment coming up in January. So I'd like Ryan to pull that up really quick if you could. Actually go to earthevolution.com/energy-analytics. But there is an alignment occurring between Mars, Venus, Mercury on one side of the sun, and then on the other side, we have Earth and Jupiter. So we have a perfect alignment between all the planets going out to 5.2 astronomical units of Jupiter this January. Specifically, here we go, from like the 4th to the 10th. It's really quite striking. And you don't see alignments like that often. And then we have this conjunction between Saturn and Neptune. So they're going to reapply, go exact, and then move on. But if you just click it and then click the Earth and drag it to the right until right there. Now, yeah, see, now zoom out. You just scroll out on the wheel and zoom in a little bit more so you can see Jupiter. See that alignment with Jupiter? If you just kind of spin it around, you'll be able to get a good look at that. Jupiter's below us right now. So kind of, yeah, exactly. So that's the alignment that we have coming up in January. I don't know if anything, if at all, if at all is going to happen, but I look through the past 1,000 years or so of alignments similar to that, and they often coincide with pretty big events. Like we had a similar alignment with the Carrington event.
Really?
Yeah, it involved Saturn, not Jupiter, and it wasn't a perfect line. It was kind of skewed, but there was a pretty notable planetary alignment with Saturn. And there was other alignments that occurred with big earthquakes and big volcanic eruptions. So again, you don't know exactly how it's going to manifest, but that's the science of planetary resonances in this archetypal kind of consciousness morphic field is that it just brings powerful events to the surface. So we don't know what's going to, if anything, but that is something I'm that's pretty wild. And then we have this big conjunction between Saturn and Neptune. And so the take home beyond expect the unexpected is that now is the time if you wanted to reprogram yourself in any way, dissolve old patterns, limiting beliefs, programs that have been put into you from parents, from your community, from Big Brother, whatever. Now is the time where you're energetically supported to do that. And you're also supported to take whatever passion, idea, and dream that you can and manifest into reality. And it's going to be another 35 to 37 years until the next one where you have the universe naturally supporting you with that. There's other time periods, of course, with other things, but this is a very powerful time for that. And so don't be surprised if we see structures dissolve at the societal scale, if we see strong, powerful Earth events or solar events, and tremendous transformations internally. I'm personally noticing that. A lot of people around the world are seeing that. It's a lot of people are having an awakening of higher consciousness and connection to higher spirit. And so that's kind of the deeper foundational thing that's happening now. And really it's an opportunity to everybody to seize upon. And so it's fun to talk about all this stuff, but real world take home, I can make my life better. That's something that's occurring that's supporting that, which isn't always active. Sometimes there's planetary resonances that are really not supportive, like what happened in 2020 was a big alignment. Of course, we had COVID, and then same alignment occurred with the World Trade Center. And you can go back in time to all these bad events that line up with Pluto, Saturn. So there's times when it's well, we're effed, we're cooked. Right now, we have a good alignment. So it's a good time to utilize those energies. So that's my take home. You can find more of me on my YouTube channel, which is Stefan Burns. So STEFANBURNS. My website, earthevolution.com. And yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, you're again, like I mentioned, to kind of kick this off, you've really been blowing up, and especially, really for gosh, for the last year or more. But I mean, lately it's been crazy. I think I checked a month ago. Like I said, you're 400,000. You're over 500,000 on YouTube now. You're about to be probably, you know, in terms of space weather reporting, you'll be the go-to person here. I think in the next couple of years that people are really gonna, you know, look to for their news.
Already am.
Yeah, yeah.
If you go by all metrics,
Yeah.
then we're ready.
Yeah, but I mean on a bigger scale. Like I mean, I don't even think that people really understand or appreciate space weather news in general as like a category yet. And I feel like there's going to be a lot more people that are going to be connecting to you in the future that don't even pay attention to it now. You know, that aren't even on that don't even see that in their periphery yet, that will be connecting. It's just with the rate that you're growing, the information that you're bringing, the way that you kind of report on it I think it's really cool. I enjoy watching your content tremendously, obviously, and enjoy connecting with you. So keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job, and I know there's plenty more growth in the future, and you're educating people on what's actually happening out there. So it's really cool.
Well, thank you. And I'm glad that you have an interest because you reach a wide audience and you're connected to all these other niches too. So it's been cool to see you educate yourself more and more in this from all the different perspectives. And yeah, I mean, this conversation, you asked like good questions, and it was exciting to see perhaps next year or 3-4 years down the line, whatever, we don't know what happens. But if there's another conversation we have here in the Limitless studio, the level of detail and quality that we'll reach. And just, I want to keep pushing the field forward while being inclusive of all these other things, but also not just entertaining pure nonsense. I do my best not to. We want to move forward in a good way, especially if we're going to reach that wide audience. Like, we need to have good track record, some wins under our belt, and starting to get those.
Good.
So it's awesome.
Awesome. Very good, man. It's been a lot of fun. We'll wrap it at that. Thank you so much for being here, Stefan.
Thanks.
Awesome.